General Manager, NTV, Mr. Johnson Omolo, to come and give his welcome remarks as well, and thereafter we'll invite the Minister to give an address.
The Minister of Finance, Planning and Economic Development, represented by Mrs. Rosette Nabumba Nayenga, Deputy Head of Budget Monitoring and Accountability Unit, the Board Chair, Forum for Women in Development, Mrs. Joyce Tamale, invited guests, ladies and gentlemen, in your respective capacities, I salute you all. On behalf of NTV Uganda and FAODE, we are proud and happy to host this post-budget dialogue, which dialogue is intended to review whether the 2019-2020 budget is leaving no one behind. This dialogue will look at picking signals from a gender and equity dimension from the National Budget 2019-2020. As a developing nation, in the world all over, there will be resource constraints in fully meeting the aspirations and the wishes of the people of Uganda from a budget point of view. When I listened to the Minister's speech during the budget presentation, I picked a few signals that I believe address the gender and equity dimension in this country. And he talked about, among others, the provision of universal primary and post-primary education has led to 92% of all parishes and 71% of all sub-counties having a government-aided primary and secondary school respectively. All major regions of the country have a public university. Consequently, the literacy rate of persons aged 10 years and above currently stands at 74%. I think that is a signal, as the moderators will talk about, from a gender and equity dimension. The budgetary allocation to the Ministry of Education stands at 3.6 trillion, 3.4 trillion Uganda shillings in the national budget. The health sector has a budget allocation of 2.6 trillion, and there has been continued progress registered in disease prevention and treatment, provision of essential medical supplies, and the development of critical health infrastructure. For instance, malaria prevalence among children under 5 has reduced significantly from 30% in 2015 to 17% in 2018. So I believe the budget will leave no one behind in 2019-2020. Therefore, the budget presentation by the Ministry of Finance has good signals from a gender and equity dimension. Through such dialogues and forums, we can help government improve and make the necessary fiscal policy adjustments to support our national budget theme, which is industrialization for job creation and shared prosperity. We are confident that the team assembled here as panelists will review the budget, and at the end of the day, we hope nobody will be left behind. I thank you all for coming, and I wish you good deliberations in this dialogue. I thank you.
Thank you very much, Johnson. Now, with the organizers having given us their remarks, we can comfortably dig deep into our program, which will begin, as I've said, by the address by the Minister of Finance. This is his budget and is ably represented here. and going to give us the communication regarding the budget that starts next week on Monday. Ask your neighbor whether they know what gender means. One of the challenges I faced in the Ministry of Finance when I worked there was to understand what gender meant, because they brought something called gender budgeting. I knew budgeting, but not gender. And so I don't want to expose my ignorance here before you and before these cameras. I will stick away from that and leave you to dialogue on the issue of gender. But this discussion is about gender impliedly, because quite often some gender aspects are left behind or left out. Let me invite a colleague of mine. We have worked together for over 20 years closely. I have learned a lot from her. She was my senior in the world of research. And now I'm glad she's representing another friend of mine, the Minister of Finance. Madam Minister of Finance, I don't know the protocols, but you have the floor.
Thank you very much, my friend Fred. The General Manager of NTV, the Board Chair of Forwarding, Members of Parliament in the House, development partners, civil society organizations, government officials, distinguished participants, ladies and gentlemen, good morning. I'm here to represent the Minister of Finance, Planning and Economic Development, Honorable Matia Kasaija, who could not be with us this morning due to other state duties. The Honorable Minister and the entire Ministry of Finance, Planning and Economic Development commend the work by Forwarding, Uganda Gender Consortium on Sustainable Development Goals, and TV Uganda, and other partners who are undertaking so much work to make the budget more accessible to the public. This public dialogue is timely and critical for generating debate on pertinent issues of human development and gender and equity responsiveness. Evidence from scholars and practitioners around the world have validated the strong correlation between human capital development and economic growth. Education and health, for instance, have strong effects on labor productivity, innovation, and technological improvements, and the distribution of income within a nation. At the same time, gender and equity responsiveness in planning and budget implementation has been proved to promote inclusive growth and development. A study undertaken by Ministry of Finance in 2012 revealed that addressing gender inequalities leads to an additional 1.2 percentage point growth in GDP annually. The government is fully committed to realizing Sustainable Development Goal 16 that places responsibility on all of us to promote peaceful and inclusive societies by ensuring that no one is left behind. So allow me at this point to speak to two of the issues that are central to this dialogue. The first one being human development, and then I will end with gender and equity responsiveness. On the issues of human development, this is a long-term process that the government of Uganda has focused on since the 1990s with the aim of achieving inclusive growth and socioeconomic transformation. For example, the Poverty Eradication Action Plan that was implemented since 1997 to 2010 prioritized actions aimed at improving the quality of life of the poor by focusing on expanding healthcare services, family planning, water and sanitation, primary and secondary education. During the national development period, since 2010 to date, the government has consistently prioritized further investments towards expanding delivery of health, education, nutrition, and skills development. As a consequence of these investments, by June 2019, you already had that 92% of all parishes and 71% of all sub-counties have a government-aided and secondary school, respectively. In the health sector, malaria prevalence among children under 5 has reduced significantly, and the number of maternal deaths recorded at health centers has also reduced considerably. These are all very encouraging outcomes from the deliberate public spending aimed at enhancing human capital development. However, we acknowledge that government is yet to achieve fully inclusive growth, as we still have many outstanding human development-related challenges that must be addressed. One of them is the income inequality, which has widened between rural and urban areas. Also, we noticed that from the Uganda National Household Survey 2016-17, the proportion of population living below the national poverty line rose from 20% in 2012-13 to 21%. These are issues that we must look at in order to achieve inclusive growth. Let me now talk about gender and equity responsiveness. In the spirit of leaving no one behind, the government embraced gender and equity budgeting as a tool for inclusive growth and development as early as 2003. In February 2015, the government strengthened its commitment to realizing equal opportunities in planning and budgeting by enacting the Public Finance Management Act with 3 provisions of compliance to gender and equity in planning and budgeting. We have had an assessment of the ministerial policy statements for 2019-20 that relate to the budget we are about to implement, done by the Equal Opportunities Commission. And these results show a gradual improvement in the level of compliance to gender and equity requirements from 40% in 2015-16 to 60% currently. The improvement is attributed to capacity building efforts, change of attitude and development, and availability of guiding tools for mainstreaming gender and equity in national planning. Examples of key gender and equity commitments in our budget of 1920 include the Uganda Cancer Institute has allocated Uganda Shillings 0.2 billion towards establishment of an oncology center in northern Uganda. The Uganda Prison Service commits to supporting 3 daycare centers in Ruzira, Mbarara, and Gulu. They are going to give care to 237 babies staying with their mothers in prison, and they provide sanitary towels and knickers to all female inmates. They will care for the elderly prisoners, and all this is budgeted at 89.335 billion in 1920. The Ministry of Trade also has allocated a total of Uganda Shillings 0.03 billion for training 480 small and medium-scale enterprises in business development services, and this will especially target the youth and women entrepreneurs. It's not sufficient to monitor the level of compliance of gender in ministerial policy statements, as this does not give us an adequate picture of whether gender and equity concerns have been addressed in planning and economic development. Therefore, the Ministry of Finance, Planning and Economic Development, with support from UN Women and in collaboration with the Equal Opportunities Commission, has introduced monitoring of gender and equity compliance in budget execution, starting in financial year 2019-20. This is to be implemented by the Budget Monitoring and Accountability Unit, which shall produce regular gender and equity monitoring reports starting in the first half of 2019-20. In conclusion, on behalf of the Minister of Finance, Planning and Economic Development and the Ministry, I thank the organizers and sponsors of this dialogue, and we look forward to the recommendations that will inform budget execution for the year 2019-20. Whatever you recommend, we are looking forward. We would like to hear the concerns. We are here to record whatever you might wish to see change, and this will be implemented as we go into the budget. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Honorable Mr. Madam Minister, sir. Just in case the arrangement matters for you. Those are important things for us to have. When I was still closely working with Rosette and ministers, we were challenged again to say, how gender sensitive is your budget? By then we didn't require a certificate of financial implications. And as advisor to the minister, I lifted the entire defense budget and threw it in the gender basket and said we are compliant to 60%. And people asked me why I said the entire Ministry of Defense is working for gender. That was the time when many of you have forgotten people are living in camps in northern Uganda. And the most affected people were women and children. Things have moved on, things have changed. Now I wouldn't put the entire defense budget as a gender-responsive budget. And so we need to rethink what has happened, what are the new emerging things that we need to be addressing. I'm not going to delve into this. There is a keynote speaker to this subject, leaving no one behind, and we found a woman to come and speak to that constituency. I know there are some men here who are a little bit gender compliant, or maybe even more. But women are always ahead of us in some of these things. Doctor, why don't you come and introduce yourself briefly and then detailedly give us your keynote address.
Thank you, Fred. Ms. Rosette Nabumba, Honorable Minister of Finance, Planning and Economic Development. She is the minister today. And we have to recognize that. Ms. Joyce Tamalie, Chair Board of Directors, Forum for Women in Development. Mr. John, the Managing Director, NTV. Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, all protocol observed. Good morning to you all. I think we need a bit livelihood. So in terms of, you just had breakfast. Good morning. That's much better because we need to look at leaving no one behind, and I don't want to leave you behind when I'm speaking. I'm Medina Gulova, a senior research fellow at the Economic Policy Research Center and the head of the Microeconomics Department. We are situated at Makerere University, not necessarily part of the university, but that's where we are located. I'm an economist by profession. I'm pleased to give this keynote speech today under the theme, the financial year 2019-2020, leaving no one behind. The major point of discussion is to critically step back and provide a gender and equity lens on the 1920 budget and how inclusive it is in attaining the citizens' interests, because we don't need to leave anyone behind. So the issue is the 2019-2020 budget people-centered? And that's the issue. So my central argument to this is that for no one to be left behind, then the budget must be people-centered with a micro lens, not at the broad level. That is what it means in not ensuring that we've left no one behind, is when we look at the nitty-gritties downstream. So how do we do this? The key human development equity issues will always lie in several aspects. Issues of education, issues of health, water and environment, the political participation and leadership, and the incomes that we've been talking about here today. So on whether these address gender biases in attainment is what we're going to discuss here in detail. So generally, or simply put, if we look at the per unit expenditures within the budget or within the sectoral allocations, will they drive us in achieving quality, equity, and quantity mix in public service provision, which will actually result into household livelihoods improving across all social divide in terms of ensuring equality and equity in access. So the issue again is the 2019-20 national budget indeed driving us there? We noted that at least the latest budget, there were certain notable increments in education of a certain magnitude. We see in education, the magnitude of increments in the budget increased by 21.3%. In health, it increased by 13%. In agriculture, by 17.9%, almost 18%. But one of the other critical human development issues, you have to address water and environment or sanitation. The budget recorded a decline, a huge decline of 13.7%. What does this have implications? Because in terms of the ecosystem of building coherence across sectors, there is no way education, health, other sectors of agriculture will work without water and environment. So the issue is, why the reduction? Does the budget feel that whatever is being done in that area was sufficient enough for the budget within water and environment to warrant a reduction? So again, we also note that with deep scrutiny in terms of reviewing the budget itself, these increments in these sectors of education, health, and all, it's more towards the recurrent expenditure, and those are the wages, and more less towards the development expenditure. So what would this mean? That the per unit expenditure to that school-going child will always remain low if you factor in aspects of population growth. Then the 40 trillion something budget, is it going to respond to the poor issues that address the people? Because that's the issue, not necessarily the salaries, but what's going to that child in attaining that quality education. But we have to be recognizing that while the Minister of Finance was presenting the budget, he also noted that Uganda is still being faced with major challenges amid its achievements. The development challenges will always be unemployment, which increased, issues around income inequality, which the Honourable Minister has actually noted, has widened, issues around aspects of malnutrition and unhealthy lifestyles. What can we say now? You find out at the moment, anyone to get a bit of money, the unhealthy lifestyle lies in going for KFC every day. What does that mean? Diabetes, issues around cancers are rising. Those are the unhealthy lifestyles we're talking about. They're on the rise. We must admit that these challenges have emerged partly due to the poor planning from our policymakers, even ourselves. We see, for example, unemployment and underemployment, which is a key issue, also even much more diverse and more of a problem. Underemployment is much higher among men and women and much higher among also the youth. But these two lead to factors beyond skills development. We must say that. Some of these aspects look at the discrimination that comes within the job market, more biological than actually beyond skills mismatch. We've all heard about I think we know the slogan, the red carpet jobs. Some people do have the skills, but because of the biological connotation on it, you're actually overlooked in terms of these opportunities that are presented to you. I think we see most of the girls in reproductive age, when you finish university, you struggle more to look for a job and attain it. And yet you've even gotten these first classes compared to your male counterparts who you've actually exceeded. Why? You're looked at as a threat in the job market. Probably the day you join is the day you start churning out the babies. So you need paternity leave or maternity leave. You need extra support in health. So those are the kind of things we need to look at in terms of the opportunities beyond skills mismatch that government is also fronting. So in actual sense, this will call for inclusivity, which has to be exemplified by the slogan of today of leaving no one behind. How? Indeed, leaving no one behind is the driving force behind the SDGs, as both the board chair indicated and the Honourable Minister, which is being championed by the UN, for which most countries, including Uganda, we are committing to attaining. What does this mean? it suggests that the no goal is going to be met unless it is met for everyone. Everyone has to be included for all these SDG goals to be achieved. So therefore, the budget is one of the key tools that government can use to bridge the increasing inequalities that we see. So while the aggregate discipline that budget is actually used in execution, there is need to ensure the technical and allocative efficiency in the sectors for effectiveness of building infrastructure, either soft infrastructure, and human capital in executing them. So to put this into context in terms of how this can be done, we noted that according to the Human Development Report, Uganda achieved only 0.5% of the index in human development. What does this mean? On average, just in the basic dimensions of human development, education, health, incomes. And this is below the international standards that are required of achieving around 55% in these dimensions. So while some of the issues that are driving the poor performance in these dimensions that are critical in leaving no one behind are issues around education, issues around income inequalities, issues around the life expectancy. It has actually improved, but we're still below the required international standards. So, for example, we find that the international SDG 4.3 on expected years of schooling, we just have 11.6. That means that based on expected life expectancy, at least they're expected to finish 11 years in school. That's up to senior 4. But what are we seeing? The mean average years of schooling for any Ugandan child is 6 years, if you exclude the nursery section. So what does that mean? That is the UPE working? Is the USE working? That's Universal Secondary Education. Because that means we have these programs that are trying to make sure they bring everyone on board, but still a primary school going child, we're not exceeding in the primary 7. That's the mean average in terms of school attainment for a Ugandan child or Ugandan student. So we need to do more. So probably it's beyond government sometimes in terms of ensuring that these programs work. So what would we have to do as our citizens to ensure that all these come on board to benefit from the government programs? So to put into the gender perspective from the human development issue, because the inequalities in gender drive the index to another level. We noted that according to the index, the gender inequality was around 0.5 to 3, that's 52.3% of the inequalities we are having in human development as a result of the gender inequalities that we see today. So what does this mean? That the challenges will still remain in attaining human development unless we achieve and address the inequalities that lie through gender dimensions. We note that SDG 3.1, in terms of performance, we still see maternal deaths, at least 343 per every 100,000 births, they are dying in childbirth. Adolescent birth rates, around 106 young girls are still producing per 1,000 women you see around there. So we still have high adolescent birth rates. We still see high levels of women participating in politics, but this is not by design and willingness. It's caused by the issue around the political mandatoriness in terms of women participating in politics. But if you see the constituency participation itself directly, only 2% of women are coming in directly to be elected in politics, beyond the seats that government gives you in terms of women representation. So we need to step up our game as well. But again, some people will say we need to take money out of politics for women to come. But we see, they will also say that for a woman to participate in directly elected politics, she has to be a widow. She has to be married. You have no one to answer to at home. So the social norms still are also driving us back in terms of participation in some of these aspects. In terms of education attainment, that's achieving the SDG goal 4.6, men still have a higher attainment in education, secondary school education attainment compared to their women counterparts at 26.7%. for the 10-year period of 2010 to 2019. So we still have more to do. Then we see also the participation in labor force increasing, at least according to the Uganda National Household Survey. We've seen women labor force participation increasing. But again, we have to put this into caution. It's only increasing because you're factoring in subsistence farming, not necessarily that they're in paid employment that actually improves your incomes. And this is where the men actually dominate. So with this in mind, the human development concerns for men and women, boys and girls, have they been addressed in the budget in terms of ensuring labor participation is equitable, in terms of ensuring maternal mortality rates are declining, in terms of ensuring that school-going children are in school and the mean average years of schooling actually are increasing, in terms of ensuring that the health is actually resonating to the needs of the Ugandans. So also note, as the Honorable Minister indicated, the Certificate of Gender and Equity Responsiveness, when it was submitted, indeed, only 60% of the ministries, departments, and agencies passed that pass mark. So where's the 40% in terms of ensuring that they actually have the gender responsiveness with them? That means they're gender blind. So what are they doing? Where are we going to apply the stick and carrot in terms of ensuring that all the planning and policy frameworks for all the MDAs are gender responsive? So, however, we also must commend government for addressing some of these issues through the Youth Livelihood Program, though we still have issues around it in terms of targeting, the Uganda Women Entrepreneurship Program, we have the microfinance-related programs, even the Operation Wealth Creation. I know some people will still say how, but we still have it in terms of driving some of these issues of equity in terms of food security within a home, which brings people on board. But nonetheless, we also see that government is increasingly taking interest in agriculture in terms of trying to see increments in the budget, but still they are below average. We need to see that kind of drive that if agriculture is the backbone, then the increased focus of Uganda's budget in making sure it for agriculture is really amplified to the level that's going to make sure the women who are more engaged are not left behind. But there is scope to improve and to do more beyond what they are doing. So to conclude, we also note that an inclusive budget is the one where there is participation at the grassroots, so which calls for a micro approach to this budgeting, unless I'm not aware. So to what extent has the budget involved that person below to come and do the budgeting, rather than the top-bottom approach that now the budget has been passed, we have to go around to make sure people understand it. Can they own what they do not know? How can they implement what they were not part of from the beginning? So we have to be cognizant of that. So we have to also ensure that allocation to education should be adequate for a holistic education and skills development. In addition, the budget must be sensitive to the demographic changes. The population is still increasing. And should finance programs that continuously encourage economic employment opportunities for the youth, for those even not beyond the youth, but even for the old and the children who are improvised. So in this case, government should invest more in promoting the domestic capacity to do business, rather than the current FDI bias, the foreign direct investments. So to what extent is government driving the domestic investors? Because they do know us more than the foreign investors. So what level of the environment is government putting in order to drive out the domestic investors in terms of uplifting them to create jobs for fellow Ugandans? So we must point out that there is also a disconnect between the spending or activities at the ministries, departments, and agencies and the local economic development and service delivery needs. To what extent does the budget align to the real needs of its citizens? Or are we just addressing pockets of a diagnosis in terms of let's give some few ECDs to the prisoners, yeah? So that's what I call pockets of implementation. Some of these issues have to be universally rolled out such that the theme of no one is left behind comes on board and speaks to us. In terms of pockets of addressing some of these issues, we might not see ourselves there. So I'll leave that to the panelists to answer some of these questions in detail. And I would like to thank the Forum for Women in Development and its counterparts for inviting me to make this keynote speech. And I hope to enjoy the deliberations from this dialogue and the tangible outcomes that for all of us to implement, including government, for God and my country. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Dr. Madina Goloba. That's another colleague of mine. I've worked in many places. Now I begin to notice I have very many friends who are in big places. So one of these days I should be bragging around, eating dates, knowing that after all, when the payment comes, I have enough friends to bail me out. What did people go to government for bailout? Yeah, we can also go to government because I've noticed some information coming through from the Ministry of Finance via the media, social media, which is reliable these days, not fake news, that about 54% of those claiming money from government as domestic arrears were actually fake. That is both worrying and a relief to know that of about 1.3 trillion of the 2.8 trillion of domestic arrears is the only money government has to pay. So that means about 1.5 trillion was fake. We won't prosecute them because we don't have money to feed them in prison. There must be very many of them. You better leave them to go. But at least we're not going to pay. But that's the budget we're engaging. That vultures keep targeting it from different corners. So Dr. Madina, thank you very much for taking us through the discussions. And I'm going to be inviting my panelists to take their seats. Each one chooses a chair of their best choice. I am not going to introduce them. You notice I've tried to avoid introducing people because they are all of age. So they will speak to you, you hear their voices, they will tell you what they are doing, the latest car they are not driving in town, but they would have loved to. And then the latest car they are driving that they want to throw away. So I will be asking them the tough questions along the way, including questions that you may imagine are not easy to ask. A question like, some of you ate chicken sausage. What type of chicken was that? Local or foreign? Was it male or female? Was it brown or white? Was it raised in the central region or northern? These are the questions we are going to engage. We must leave no one behind. My panelists, please take your seats. As you take your seats, I will be informing you, you need to save your data, just in case you are here and you have a phone that is smart. Panelists, please take your seats. We're going into a panel discussion. As I've told you, I'll be asking them all these questions. Letter M at Majestic, so it is Majestic 18, but the A for Majestic is the @ sign for most of you who are computer tech savvy. That is the Wi-Fi password. Please use it to tweet, use it to catch up with what you need to catch up with. I have an extra chair here. I might use it, I may not use it, because this chair is meant for you. So at one point, I will invite the plenary to occupy this chair from wherever you are. Off we go. I want to begin from the next immediate person to me. And let's switch off our mics if we are not the ones speaking, so that they don't pick echoes, but also they don't pick what you are trying to whisper to your neighbor at that point in time, which is not intended for the audience. I am going to begin with the person closest to me. You are going to introduce yourself, your name, where you work, and then we'll go around all the way to where the men. This is a very gender-sensitive panel, you can see. So I will end with the man at the end. For this round, just introduce yourself, where you work, and a little bit of what you want to tell the people about yourself. and then I'll come back to you later on.
Thank you so much, Moderator. I'm Betty Ajambowire. I'm the District Deputy Speaker, Busia District Local Government, and also a Women Councillor representing Busitema Sukuda in Busia District Council. I've been steering the District Council of Busia for the last 2.5 years as the acting district speaker. I'm a mother, I'm a farmer, a social worker, and I'm here on behalf of local governments and the rural women down there in the village. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. We are ably represented, leaving no one behind. The local governments are in the house. Next, please.
Thank you, Dr. Muhumuza. Good morning, everyone, and our viewers and listeners out there. My name is Rita Achiro. I am a social development worker. I work with an organization called Uganda Women's Network. That's a women's rights organization. I am a women's rights activist, unapologetic, a human rights defender. I am a Ugandan citizen, a proud one at that. I love my country. And I'm contemplating of becoming a farmer.
Are those hands for Betty, for Rita, or for becoming a farmer? They seem not to be very strong. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Muhumuza. Good morning, distinguished guests and viewers out there. My name is Lydia Kobsinge, Program Officer, National Union of Disabled Persons of Uganda. I am passionate about inclusive planning and budgeting for various marginalized persons, including women, youth, and persons with disabilities.
Thank you very much. Feel free to adjust your microphone to your comfort.
Sure.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Nyuara Joshua Kata. I'm a member of parliament representing Padiere constituency, Nebi. I've been a member of the gender committee for the last 8 years of my life in parliament. And I was a member of the committee on gender, even in the district council, where I sat as a representative of the youth from 2006. So added to that, I think advocacy on gender equity, gender matters is actually my interest. I'm a lawyer, and I'm also the minister for, I think people are wondering, this minister they've never heard. But I'm a shadow cabinet minister for human rights. And above all, I think I'm a Ugandan that pays expert attention to matters that affect us, the people who are run on behalf of government. Thank you.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Emmanuel Mutaiziwa. I work with NTV as the investigations editor. I'm very passionate about issues on gender equality and equity. And in a nutshell, we spend most of our time in the newsroom to try and break down these elitist amorphous documents called budgets. We try to simplify them to see how the common man benefits, to see how they are inclusive, to see how they affect issues to do with gender and equality. It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Emmanuel. Let's switch off our microphone, but I will soon be getting to you. Remember, #GenderBudget. Tweet and send as many of those messages out there so that people can know what is going on here. Wi-Fi, we said, is Majestic 18. That's the password. and then you can begin to tweet away the proceedings and any of your other views so that you are interactively in cyberspace with this budget. I want to begin with Lydia Kobsing to ask you to speak to the theme, leaving no one behind. What does that basically mean to you, and what would you want to tell a Ugandan out there? What is leaving no one behind space talking to?
Thank you very much. To me, leaving no one behind means putting into consideration the needs of all the persons, especially those that are vulnerable. The youth, the women, the elderly, children, among others. Coincidentally, the theme for this financial year is about shared prosperity, still reechoing this theme of the Sustainable Development Goals. For one, I am continually baffled at the fact that the social development sector, which is handling all the concerns of marginalized persons and issues to do with labor protection, among others, continues to receive minute fundings. This year, it is only 218 billion out of the 40.4 trillion budget. How are they expected to support all these persons ensuring affirmative action? We are continually seeing the fact that in the equal opportunities assessment of the various sector budgets, we see very minimal improvement. They talked about the overall improvement, 40 to 60%, wonderful. But if we go to the various indicators, location is the best performed, is the best performing indicator, followed by gender. Disability remains stagnant. Youth, children, elderly, among others, continues to increase only minimally. How inclusive are our budgets? Issues to do with decent work and employment. 4 out of 10 youth are unemployed. We're looking at scattered skills programs across the country in various sectors, which are unable to reach as many youths and people of various ages because they are only minuscule across those different sectors. In the health sector, we're looking at issues of teenage pregnancies on the rise. We're looking at issues of HIV/AIDS. We're looking at only about less than half of both women, young people of both sexes being aware of how to avoid contracting HIV/AIDS. We are looking at issues of inclusion in how to access information. Can persons with disabilities or the youth, do they have access to health information, to sexual reproductive information, so that they are able to protect themselves and live to many years? In aspects of access to education, as a keynote speaker highlighted, girls are more than likely, especially in secondary education, to drop out because of issues of rape, early marriages, poor menstrual facilities, lack of menstrual facilities, among others. And also, of course, bringing the aspect of disability. How inclusive are these spaces? Is there physical accessibility? Are the toilets, do they make provisions for persons with disabilities to use these? We of course commend government efforts, but there is still so much to be done to ensure that no one is left behind.
Thank you very much. I think she's bringing out a lot of specifics. It is one thing to easily say, well, we have built enough toilets. When we look at our indicators that we used to monitor with my colleague Rosette, you are counting the number of toilet stands available for the boys, for the girls, and being happy you're making progress. But what about people with disabilities? You might easily leave them falling through the cracks. That's not easy for them to reach those places. I've seen some toilets in our slums that are really located upstairs. Does that speak to anyone? How do you get there if you're a person with a disability? Is that a hospitable space for you to stay in? So there are quite a number of things that are specifics, and I'm glad Lydia has spoken to those, and we'll be bringing them out. I want to get to Emmanuel. Emmanuel, you do lots of investigative journalism, and I imagine you go
please.
all the way to the ground. You even brought us where people were being sold at prices lower than oranges. You know, those kinds of things. Have you met people out there who have been left behind, and how do we get them in? Speak to the theme, please.
Definitely, the theme is very relevant today, and it begs the question, who are these people who are being left behind? Specifically, let me address myself to what is quite prevalent in this country, the human trafficking of our girls to the Middle East. Not so long ago, I think I had the gender minister speaking with a very glowing tone about the numbers of our young girls who have gotten employed in the Middle East. But this is the stark reality. These girls are simply sold in slave markets. The ones that we see at the airports dressed in these veils and all this kind of stuff are those that go through the official channels. How about those that go through porous border entry points and are kept in safe houses before they are flown to Oman and all these places? We also know the culture in those countries is very repugnant towards women and girls. We know very well that many of these girls are dying under this kind of a very, very egregious form of slavery. We know that many bodies are returned every week, and we don't see any response from government, apart from, the usual knee-jerk responses. We must address this. The African Union Solemn Declaration on Gender Equality addresses this issue and encompasses a robust participation of gender to address this issue of human trafficking. I think for government that is here, one of the ways definitely is how can we ensure that this, budget, this economy we say is growing, addresses the issue of youth unemployment. How do we ensure that the girls who are leaving school get employed and are not ending up in these slave markets in Oman and Saudi Arabia? We had an incident not so long ago where one of our envoys who exposed this crime in one of, I think it was in the United Arab Emirates, was instead recalled because she exposed these slave labor markets. So it's a very pertinent issue to recall that as we make these budgets, as we, dole out monies to the energy sector, for instance, where we continue to produce more power than we can consume, to think about how we are going to simplify this issue and ensure that the girl child, the women of this country are taken care of. The women who give birth on floors in hospitals, the women who cannot afford a cesarean at Mulago Hospital, which costs in the new section, I think, 10 million shillings. Can you imagine such a staggering amount of money? Thank you very much.
Thank you, Emmanuel. It looks like when we leave them behind, they don't stay behind. They creatively try to find out what to do. But whatever they end up with is not a nice story to write home about. We sometimes do pass legislations, and I will be coming to the Honorable Member of Parliament. I heard some people saying, stop giving money to the street children. I'm like, it was my money. And I've been passionately touched by the condition this child is in. So when I stop giving them money, what is going to happen? I think the best approach would have been, take them away so that I don't find them. But don't tell me, don't give them. And as long as they are there, I'm passionately touched. So how are we approaching issues of those who have been left behind? And now these children relocated to unknown places. As we speak, you all know the story of 6 of them who succumbed to a wall falling on top of them, and they died. So these are some of the things that we really want the budget to address, that when we leave them behind, things do happen to them. But also, who is in front? We shall be asking these questions. Because as we say, don't leave them behind, I want to believe some people have gone in front. Are those in this room in front? Are you in between? Are you behind? I'll be opening up the plenary very soon to you people to tell us where you are and with evidence. Rita Achiro, you're prospecting to get into farming. And here are people saying farming has not been given enough money. It looks like that's not true. I don't see you going to where there is no money. Maybe the reason you are deliberating is, speak to the theme, please. What does it mean to you leaving no one behind?
Leaving no one behind, to me, and I would like to convince you without any duress, to believe that leaving no one behind means inclusivity, it means fairness, equity, and equality. What does that mean? That means whatever action we take, and in this case, the resources we have and allocate have to have at the back of it all the aspect of fairness, which is equity and equality. How do you do that? Is by understanding the different sects or groups of people who should be benefiting from this budget and probably who are not. You should do that also by understanding what are the driving forces and the reinforcers of these inequalities. That is what inclusivity means to me. That is what it means not to leave anybody behind. Because we are not homogeneous, communities are not homogeneous. And for you to be able to say that you have not left anybody behind, you need to understand and dissect the individuality of groups or groups of people or societies, allocate resources based on that analysis. Allocate resources based on the things that keep them behind. In this case, Dr. Muhumuza, if we are talking about inclusivity of women and girls, we were not just going to say we've given money for women's economic empowerment and we are giving money to 100,000 of women getting that money. What are the issues that perpetuate the inequality and the widening gap of income? We need to address those issues. Access to credit, access to land, control over land, issues of education. Dr. Madina talked about human capital development. What are those, and until and unless we are able to go down deep and address those driving forces and the things that reinforce the inequalities, we will be just tackling or eating the icing on the cake.
Thank you very much. Again, going deeper into the details of issues, it's not just about the budget you allocate, it's also about what is the budget doing. Are we addressing the right issues? Are we speaking to the detailed underlying factors that create inequality? I have been to one of the factories speaking to the theme of the budget, industrialization for jobs and shared prosperity. And I found employees who were paid 100,000 per month. And when we asked the employer said, well, I give them accommodation, I give them food, so what is left of their contribution is 100,000 shillings a month. That's basically about 3,000 shillings a day. Remember, this person came to work and send money home. If those are the jobs we are going to create here, Ugandans will continue to look for the Middle East. And what do they find there? Again, very inhospitable circumstances. So we're trying to bring the budget down. The minister gave us a budget, government gave us the budget, the numbers in broad themes, but we want to bring it down to where me and you live, where those children are, where those women are, where those men are, as they are trying to make a living. Is the budget leaving them behind? And as I said, I'll be getting back to you. But let me pick up Honorable Anywa Rach. You sit in Parliament. You are on the shadow cabinet. You represent Padier, one of those, I believe, constituencies that I don't know whether it is in middle or left behind, or these days it has come out and is possibly in front. What are the discussions, and give us a snapshot of what goes on in these deliberations in that parliament as you represent us? Do you have such considerations as leaving no one behind in those discussions? Honorable.
Well, I want to thank you, Mr. Moderator. I think we need to look at two things. One, is this the first time Uganda is passing a budget? No. We have always done it. Number two, has our budget always captured our interests, our aspirations, economic aspirations of Ugandans? The answer could be yes or no, depending on your interpretation. What goes on in Parliament every year, each time we're passing the budget, I will focus on now, the budget of this year. We passed a budget that, to me, I think is dead on arrival. So if it is dead on arrival for all of us, then the women are not safe, children are not safe, the disabled are not safe. Here is the reason. We passed a budget that saw a lot of deviations from the aspirations of Ugandans. When you read the Constitution, the well-being of Ugandans is one economic aspiration of the people, and that has been translated in Uganda National Development Plan 2, and that runs also with the Vision 2040. But then we have, legal frameworks that must guide these aspirations when we do the allocations. We have the budget framework paper, the 4-year budget framework paper of 2019-2020 to 2023-2024. And then, of course, we have the fiscal charter document and the Public Finance Management Act. That must guide our aspirations. Now, our budget that was passed totally deviated from this. One, the national budget framework paper that we passed was reflecting 34 trillion budget. I don't know whether any of you knows the budget of last year. Last year we were at 32. Now, we as Parliament approved a budget framework paper of 34 trillion. And Minister for Finance comes up with annual budget allocation of 40.48 trillion Ugandan shillings. And we ask ourselves, the excess 6.1 trillion, where are you going to get it from? Now, that alone actually tells you that this budget is not in the aspiration of the people, because the people representatives had decided and approved a budget framework paper that was even presented by government at 34 trillion. Number two, why do I say this budget is dead on arrival? It's dead on arrival because even when you look at our Ugandan indebtedness, we are right now going to do what we call debt servicing at 20.59 trillion. 20.59 trillion is exactly what Uganda revenue will actually collect in revenue this year. Now, therefore, we are collecting revenue to service debt. And this borrowing is not stopping. So tell me how much you are going to commit to the well-being of the people of Uganda. By the well-being requires that you develop the capital, the human capital. And when I looked at the human capital definition, initially I looked at an organization that has an employed individual whose skills and knowledge that organization needs. But in the interest of SDG, it's actually telling the organization turns now to be a country. A country must invest in capital development of its citizens. But that cannot happen when the budget has a lot of deviations. Let's look at the third deviation. We have, in the interest of the current generation and future generation, we created what we call the Petroleum Fund. And according to the budget framework paper, 2018-2019 to 2023 and 2024, we did say that about 449 billion will be withdrawn where necessary, will be transferred from the petroleum fund to the consolidated fund for purposes of development, infrastructural development. And we made it clear that for this financial year, 2019-2020, no transfer shall be made. But when government came with their further allocation of 40 trillion, they even made suggestion that they will transfer from the petroleum fund. Meaning the petroleum fund is also dead on arrival. Why? We have always taken money from there, and yet the idea of petroleum fund was to ensure that resources from the petroleum resources, and other natural resources should be kept for the current generation and the future generation. Now, that petroleum fund is also suffering another dangerous deficit in about, I think about 3.4 trillion shall be paid to licensees as soon as we start oil production. Now, shall we have monies that we can dedicate for the well-being of Ugandans, of course, women inclusive? Definitely not. Now, it's also dead on arrival, number 4. When we look at the deviations in the context of unspent balances, we raised complaint on the floor of Parliament. We said, each time money is sent to any ministry, any government agency, or even a district, within a period that they cannot use that money is sent back to the treasury. But you can never get a trace of that money, whether it goes back to the consolidated fund for reappropriation. So those unspent balances, where do they end? Do they end into the abyss for the born again, the bottomless pit? Now, those are the questions we should raise ourselves. So we cannot keep on making our budget sound so rosy for Ugandans when actually we have at the helm of the budget, in the center of the budget, is already dead on arrival. We have used the narrative of GDP, and they have convinced us on the floor of Parliament that we need to borrow money because I think our debt standing is still very good, looking at our GDP to debt ratio. That argument is so stale. Listen, look here. You have a GDP reflection growth that you're posting, that we're growing up to from 6.8 to 7.2, sounds good. But you'd ask yourself a question. When you look at the National Bureau of Statistics record that they brought to the floor of Parliament, it still indicates that up to now, an average Ugandan has about $773. And that average, I want to talk of middle income, like really middle income earners, people who earn real money, but not from agricultural economy, like where I come from, where even the dodo is in the backyard of the home, and then you have a cassava there. What a woman will need is only just money to go and buy salt. Now, I'm talking of people who earn, people who are employed, 773. And then we had said by 2020, next year, every Ugandan should be earning $1,039, which is the lower middle income status. Now, does the GDP reflect that? Absolutely no. Now, when we look at the GDP, the GDP does not show how much of the natural resources is concentrated in the hands of how many people. Now, according to the Oxfam report about bridging the gap in Uganda and who is in charge, they actually say 10% of the population are investors, and with 37% of the wealth of Uganda concentrated in their hands. So when you use the GDP, all that wealth will be reflected. But it's not in my pocket, it's not in your pocket. It's not in the pocket of someone in Chamasoka village in Hoima. It's not. So again, if you go ahead with the GDP argument, I think we are going to get lost because most of these investors are foreign investors. And they carry back their monies, repatriation of profit. Therefore, our purchasing power not there. When they're making profits, we don't have any purchasing power because profits are sent back to where they come from. Now, number 6, this budget, I think, is also dead on arrival because the critical area, you're talking about the Youth Livelihood Program here. Tell us where is the money. We told Minister of Finance, give us a code of the Youth Livelihood Program so that we put money on that code. They gave us only a code, but there's no allocation. Now, this money has been taken away from us, Minister of Gender, to the presidency. Why? Yet, actually, Minister of Gender has been implementing this budget for all these years for Youth Livelihood Program. Now, that also raises a question why NSSF was taken away from Minister of Gender to Finance. So now if you take, again, now we don't have any control. In the interest of, assuming you became today lame, a lady probably who has serious issues, complications, that may want to be getting her, benefits much earlier. That would be so simple if NSS was under Ministry of Gender, of course, would understand the language of the ladies. But for now, we must understand the strict language of NSS itself. And then we have also here issue of the women, the WEP, the Uganda Women Enterprise Program. When we went to Seychelles, at the birth of that, I think my honorable colleague was there. We went to Seychelles, and we brainstormed for almost 2 weeks to follow their approach. That's how we brought OWEP. There's a component where a lady can borrow money in Seychelles up to even 20 million. You as an individual, and you do business. But in Uganda, that component is not there, despite the fact that even OWEP is not being, I think, implemented in all districts. Now, will our women, will our ladies, will our sisters therefore have opportunity to do real business? We said, okay, fine, let's recapitalize Uganda Development Bank. They brought us a proposal of only 130 billion. How can you recapitalize Uganda Development Bank with only 130 billion? And yet you wanted to lend money at very, very low rate. Right now they're lending at 14%, which is close to the prime lending rate of commercial banks. Okay. And therefore, if I'm disadvantaged, women are also disadvantaged. And therefore, finally, I think this budget is also facing a very terrible external threat, but within the country. That is legal, but unauthorized notes. Now, the budget will be hit by the effect of legal, but unauthorized notes if the report of Bank of Uganda is what to go by. If we have legal but unauthorized notes, the danger is that Bank of Uganda will be forced all the time to be selling treasury bonds to withdraw currency from the economy. But actually, these are currency concentrated in the hands of a few people because they're legal but unauthorized. And secondly, Bank of Uganda will be struggling to step up interest rates for commercial banks to discourage borrowing so that no currency goes into the economy. Who is going to suffer? Me and you who are businessmen, women who are businessmen, because for any fluctuating interest rate, you are lending or you are borrowing at the time when you're borrowing the money is affected. So you are at default all the time. Are you surprised that we're losing all our collaterals, our buildings in this country at terrible rate? And therefore, if again you don't control legal and unauthorized notes in the country, what will happen is that the exchange market shall be affected. That's why for years now dollars cannot go below 2,500. It is 3,800 per dollar. And again, the real estate will be affected because people who have money will buy these properties against speculative value. Buyer one potential came to me and like, okay, I'm coming next week. Buyer two comes, I'm coming the other week. Then buyer four comes and said, 4 people had already visited me. So the buyer four will say, no. Buyer five will say, no, I think, let me give you 100 million. For a property that otherwise, without the illegal note, the unauthorized note, would have been about 50 million, people are going to pay 100 million, buying speculative value. So I think, moderator, without mincing words, this budget is dead on arrival.
That must be worrying somebody in Busia who is waiting for her allocation of the budget. And I'll bring her in, because if the budget is dead on arrival, then it looks like it has left everyone behind, or it has come but is not going to take anybody forward. I want to speak briefly to hear from Madame Betty Ajambo, who is here to represent herself in her capacity as a person who is involved in the local governments. So she knows the local dynamics there. She knows what budgets get to them, the concerns that they have. Is the budget leaving Busia behind? Are you included? You will send a lot of goods to us. The standard gauge rail is supposed to go through some of those places. Looks like you're in things. You won't be left behind. Please, what do you see from your constituency and district?
Thank you so much. Leaving no one behind. The Member of Parliament has actually scared me. When he mentioned that Parliament approved the budget framework paper of 34 trillion. But when the budget speech was being read, the money was 40.48 trillion shillings. Local governments in Uganda are around 168. That one includes districts and municipalities, not including town councils, sub-counties, and divisions. And when you look at the percentage which is allocated to local governments, is around 9.8 to 11% of that. And when we were making our calculations, we were looking at 4-point-something trillion shillings for all those local governments. Although Ministry of Finance puts it at 34%, they include all the projects which are implemented at local government level. But for us as local governments, that is the percentage we look at. And if it so happens that the actual framework paper, budget framework paper, had a different figure, then I believe even the budgets we approved at district level are going to be affected. When you look at that allocation, it is so meager. When you divide that amount with the number of local governments, you find that each local government is getting very little money, and yet service delivery is at grassroots level. And most of that money is recurrent expenditure. If I bring in the point of Busha district, we approved a budget of 32 billion, including local revenue, which we collect at local level. But of that 32 billion, 15 billion, which is 48%, is for education. And half of that is for salaries. So how much is going to actual service delivery? We are talking about bringing everyone on board, the women, the men, the girls, the boys, persons with disabilities, the elderly. With that meager resource, shall we be able to bring everyone on board? When you look at the education budget, the one I've put into reference, we have around 122 primary schools in Busha district. We want to construct sanitary facilities for the girl child because we don't want the girls to drop out of school. When you look at the enrollment, P1 to P4, girls are the majority. But as you proceed, P5, P6, 7, the girls begin dropping out because of the sanitation problem at schools. But because of the limited resources, in the coming year, we are only going to construct 6 5-star split latrines in primary schools with washrooms. And yet the situation is there. So you'll find that although we are talking about bringing everyone on board, it is not possible because of the meager resources we are receiving as a district. We have tried to appeal to the central government, at least to increase the percentage to local governments, but up to now, the bulk of the money remains at the center. I would like to appeal to government. It is good the Minister of Finance is represented here, that the actual service delivery is done at the grassroots. That is where the actual service delivery is done. And if we would get enough resources, when you look at the health budget, which is next to education, as per the percentages of our district budget, it also has salaries, it has drugs, it has capital development. And we have a lot of drug stockouts because NMS delivers as per your budget, as per every quarter. So you find that our people go to seek for medical services, drugs are not there. Are we including everyone? We are not. That would be my appeal. And as we continue with the implementation, as we are going to begin the financial year on Monday, as the moderator has said, in the middle of the financial year, received communication that there have been budget cuts. So instead of constructing the 6 pit latrines you've budgeted for, you end up constructing maybe 4. And I would like to concur with the Member of Parliament that this money which is retained at the end of the financial year, the one which is returned back by the Minister of Finance, I want you to note this. There is a tendency of sending money when the financial year is almost ending. And yet the system is about to be blocked. So that money is not used. It goes back to the center. But it is never sent back. Those projects are never implemented. So you find that the communities miss out the services. I think something should be done about that. I would like to appeal to the members of Parliament who are in the House. Please try to legislate about this issue, whereby money which goes back is never seen. And yet it is sent when the financial year is ending. How do you expect, maybe it is like 2 billion shillings, it is being sent when the financial year is ending. Can a local government use miracles to absorb that money? That would be my appeal. Otherwise, as per now, from when I look at this budget, we are still leaving people behind. Because there is a lot to be done, we still need more resources to be able to offer effective service delivery to our people. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Madam Betty Ajambo. Speaking of, while we say leaving no one behind, it looks like some money is also left behind. So we also need to adjust our theme to leaving no money behind. And not looking at leaving no money behind with the local governments. Because it looks like from her argument, the money that is going today should surely be left behind when the 30th of June comes up. It's okay to leave some money behind so that we don't leave anyone behind. I want at this point to get somebody to occupy this chair right from where you are. I'm opening up the plenary briefly. My panelists have all given us at least their opinions on the subject matter. And I want to hear from you. If you raise your hand as 1, 2, and 3, you'll have an opportunity to speak. I have one hand here. Now I have more than 3 hands. Okay, if you can be brief, I'll be happy to take everybody. 1 minute, and we start here. I want to recognize Honorable Sophia Nalule Juko. She's in the House. So when we are talking about MPs looking for the money that comes back, please take note. Parliament, the message has been received. Do you have a minute to quickly say what you have to say?
Good morning, all. I'm Naroga Fiona from Deje Division Women Council. There is this problem, the rosy budget that the MP has talked about. We hear of the UEP, the UN, women funds. You find that the women at a village level, they do all the procedures of getting that money. When they go to divisions, you find that there are so many groups. They display the groups for almost 2 years. They say money every year comes, but you find that on the notes board, there is only those groups, the very groups, and you don't know even those groups, who the owners of those groups. You don't see the members. Meaning that those people, they keep, even those people on divisions, they form their own groups, they eat the money. These people in village, they just hear of, like, there is money, but money is not on the ground. Thank you.
Looks like now money is not left on the ground, but unknown groups are coming in. I think those are some of the issues Minister of Finance needs to be picking up. There is a hand on that table. Quick 1 minute each so that we can get as many as possible.
Thank you so much. I'm called Katoko Sylvia Caroline, the Female District Workers Councillor of Chibuku. I'm very happy for what my mama, Madam Ajambo, said about the late release of finances. Honestly, our work is interfered with. Remember, most of the government workers only depend on salary. When they come up with any projects, they are prone to audit. They are prone to queries. But the money comes very late. Someone has a family to run. I do not know if there is any opportunity for the bosses to also miss their salaries simply because of those interface and the likes, those complicated terms that keep coming up. Let people's salaries be released on time for effective service delivery. It is very bad for me to fail to defend a worker I represent because they failed to get transportation to their areas of service. 2, the delays in delivery, in the releases, also affects the service delivery. And when they release the money late, by 31st June, the money is off the accounts. But we have a pending project that wasn't implemented, that must be implemented, yet the funds will never come back. 3 is I have a concern. It's actually the last one. I have a concern. We believe 3 of every 5 girls drop out of school, usually because of lack of hygiene kits. And yet in some areas like Chibuku, where I represent, you'll find almost 4 of every 5 girls dropping out simply because they can't access the basics, especially the sanitary towels, the changing rooms, the changing wares. They are intimidated and stigmatized. So for that reason, I have a suggestion to the Ministry of Education. Why don't they permit the district offices, the relevant schools, to include on their quarterly budgets the element of, like, have a budget line for emergency sanitary towels in their schools? Because if we have the center control it, it might never be a reality. Let's push it back to the grassroots. Let every school, because we usually monitor these projects, let's monitor and find out if our girls are protected. If only they keep dropping out at this rate, we shall never have everyone on board. We'll always leave the girls behind. Let's think about them. If only we shall reach the middle income state. Thank you so much. I remain Katoko Sylvia Caroline, the District Female Workers Councillor, Chiboko District.
Thank you very much. Those views coming in, the year ends on Sunday. I don't know how many of you have paid your taxes for this year. Otherwise, Madame Rossetti would have to make a late release. She releases what she receives. So have you all paid our taxes? We want to have some concerns on that side as well. But also, how do we manage very meager budgets now? My person walking on the floor has the freedom to choose which hand to give the microphone to. Let me share the liability of being accused with him.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Be brief, 1 minute, please.
I'm called Olwen Burlington Pongwech, talking on behalf of the community from Gulo. I want to add a voice on the local government financing. And I must say that the finance that the central government is giving to the local government is really, really very small. I must give an example based on what will be given to Gulo. This fiscal year, 2019-2020, according to what Gulo has already approved, the central government transfers will be 31.5 billion. And out of this 31.5 billion, 30 billion will be to finance the current expenditure, paying wages and non-wages. Only 933 million will go to finance the district discretionary equalization grant. And that will include renovation of teachers' houses, renovation of classroom, maintenance of road, only 923 million. You wonder, if I'm to ask the ministry, what kind of planning is that? You are giving 30 billion just to supervise and manage only 900 million. What kind of planning is that? It is really very sad. Now to add on that, you are saying that part of the power you have been given to local government. And among these powers include power to plan and power to budget. And you wonder that really this power you talked about, it only ends in the conference where you will say the local government, you have power to plan and budget. If I'm to ask the team from the ministry, what kind of power do you talk about? If you want local government to plan and budget according to the IPF that you give them, that only plan according to this IPF, then what kind of power are you talking about? You wonder.
Last one.
Last one. I think I've concluded. I really want to hear from the ministry. What kind of power do they talk about when you said you have power to plan and budget?
The ministry will respond, or even if they don't respond, they are taking notes. They do recognition, they do consultations. Please, let's use 1 minute each so that we can give space for as many people to express their views and give their comments. I want somebody to speak on behalf of government. Sure, the government knows what it is doing. Sometimes they are also trapped.
Thank you so much. Maybe they will have their own time, but today it's our time. I'm Farid Arule, and I work with the Foundation for Human Rights Initiative and the Project SEDU as the analyst elections. My worry is that everyone should also get worried because, as he said, that the budget is already dead on arrival. All the institutions are dead. Let me just end it at that. If you are a government that is talking about helping women, and right now you're actually chasing a woman who has 20,000 capital selling her bananas, and you're still relying on that person, and you're saying that you are helping these women? No. I get my salary. They deduct pay as you earn, right? My salary goes to the bank. Before it reaches actually immediately after it reaches the bank, they actually deduct another tax. When I go to withdraw, I pay tax. When I get this very money to go and pay school fees for my child, I pay tax. When I get withdraw to go to Chikubo and actually purchase things for my baby, I pay another tax. You are taxing a small group of people today, tomorrow, and every day. We have gold in Karamoja. What are you talking about gold? We have electricity. You're not telling us about the electricity, the money that you're selling to, the power that you're selling to Rwanda, the power that you're selling to DRC, the power that you're selling to Congo. You are not telling us how we are benefiting. You are saying you are actually building Uganda. And you're actually saying that the budget is inclusive. How? When you're reading different figures at every stage. No one even knows where you're getting these figures. Everyone is crying. Where are you, the MPs? Whom are you serving? One day, one time, the country is going to come back to us. Thank you so much.
Just remember, this is a forum for women in democracy. Don't forget that.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Joven Tobo. I'm from Bugema University. There is a saying that you cannot die from a disease you don't know. I think I would die very happy in my ignorance without Honorable Anywar revealing what he has just revealed. And he says the budget died on arrival. Was it on arrival in Parliament? If it died on arrival in Parliament, how was it presented to the nation? I want to further ask Honorable Anywar, in that sovereign house or that sovereign organ of government, are you the only person with eyes to read the draft budget? are you the only person with ears to listen to whoever is presenting? And are you the only person with the brains to synthesize what you have heard and seen? If you are not the only one, how was that budget approved to be presented to the nation? Thank you very much.
The previous speaker talked of dead institutions, dead budgets. I need to hear somebody talk about something else that is living.
Hello.
2 more interjections from the floor, then we'll get back to the panel, and then I'll get back to you on the floor. We have an interaction, we still have some time, but please let's use our time wisely, 1 minute per person. There was a hand in front, yes.
Thank you so much. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I'm the names of Imam Isaac Bumbri, professional footballer, formerly with Proline Soccer Academy, Chira Young, Manchester United Youth Development Team, West Ham United, Portsmouth, Leeds United, all in the UK.
Where is Cranes?
Uganda Cranes under 20 and under 17 collab.
Great.
Thank you. Now with Uganda amputee football team. Reason, I have now 1 leg. The theme is leave no one behind, but I feel left behind. I have my reasons that I feel left behind as an amputee right now, a disabled. I live where a few people live in this room, where we call the ghettos. It is hard, very hard to find a sitting toilet in the area where I live, where it's the one I need to use. Because I have 1 leg, I cannot squat with 1 leg. Thank you. The other point is I hustle so hard from town. These old buildings you see in town, we have to climb up 1 step at a time with our crutches. They do not have the lifts that we need to use to go up. Sometimes you find yourself you need to go to the last building, to the last office up on the building. You have to walk from down to the top. So I feel left behind on that case. The other side is on the sports. I'm the founder of amputee football in Uganda. After I lost my leg, I went to this other football of disabled. I'm the founder of amputee football in Uganda, and we feel like we are left behind because every now and then we hear FUFA are giving money to government giving money to FUFA. We've never had anything coming to the disabled people because we also do sports. We have David Among, the Paralympic champion. We have Pistorius from South Africa. We have all these great people that are doing great work. So we need also to be remembered on that. And less educational skills, we do not teach these disabled people how to work in these communities. Because we also, I think I'm very, very important. And I think my message here goes to everyone who's disabled in this world. We are just disabled, but it doesn't mean we're dead. We still have stuff to do. We can sit in parliament and give views like all these other people do. We're educated, but we're not giving equal chance to do like you people do. We blocked from many offices because of our physical disability. They see us as useless people. I don't want to mention offices, but we go knock on their door. We need help. We need help to raise all these sports things that we have in plan, but we're being blocked to come to you people who represent us up there. Thank you so much. Thank you for listening to me.
Those are key, genuine concerns of what you rarely think of. Honorable here talked about the big numbers we budget with, GDP per capita, roads and power, and you forget somebody, even as we are building the latrines in Busia, and surely we are going to just be building 30 stances. She's talked of 5 times 6. Chances are the 30 would not help the imam here. He still will be left behind, even after we have done that investment. That is if our budget is not going to be cut. These are the details. These are citizens. Citizens don't live in holistic numbers. Each one of them needs to have their day in office. And rightfully, as I said, some offices are not accessible. Some offices are not active. So the budget needs to really speak down to the grassroots. I will have her as the last person for now out there, and then I'll get the microphones back this side.
I'm Kayaga Aisha Shamim. I'm the chairperson of the District Women Caucus, Rural District. It is still a nightmare to many women in Rural when you say you are not leaving anyone behind. Because, taking a reference in health, the operation of health center theories to address the maternal health needs of the women is still very wanting. Most of these facilities cannot operate 24/7, yet you all know that most mothers deliver at night because of lack of staff houses, because of lack of what to use, and many of these yearn and go to traditional birth attendants where they lose their lives in the course. It's still a challenge that we operationalize these health facilities to the advantage of the women. The dwindling allocation quotas per child in secondary and primary education has put in schools in a challenge of failing to manage those schools. As a result, they have resorted to charging through their PTAs. And the money they charge has left so many girls and boys being sent home for them, and many drop out in the course. But when you ask, it's really becoming inevitable to charge because the allocation given to these schools cannot sustain these schools. I happen to sit on many of the boards and the management committees. Is still a challenge. So many girls and boys have been left behind because their parents cannot pay these PTA fees that have been put in those schools. Lastly, I want the Minister of Finance to note that the financial system being used in local governments is working for the disadvantage of the women. When I talk of UWEPO. Today, we have the money on our accounts, but we cannot use it because of supplier number. Are we serving supplier number than the people we have? We have the money, but we cannot use that money. So we need to really fix ourselves clearly. Why should these systems really drive us other than us driving them to the advantage of the woman? Lastly, as local councils, we still have challenges of the women leaders having the capacity to influence these budgets, to realize budget equity on gender. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Sometimes the systems become bigger than the people they are supposed to serve. So we want to be speaking. Before I come back to the panel, I want to invite one more contribution from the floor. And then panelists, I want you to be positive now, the next round. We want to propose, you've given your views, you've had the views from the floor. If you were sitting in the Ministry of Finance, how would you respond to some of these issues? Put yourself in that position. You have the floor. Briefly, just 1 or 2 minutes.
Thank you very much, Mr. Moderator. My name is Safia Nalule Juko. I'm the National Member of Parliament representing persons with disabilities. I also work with the Human Rights of Women and Girls with Disabilities, which is a civil society organization. I think I'm one of the very few members of Parliament who are so passionate about the issue of budget. And I'm glad that I have a background. I come from civil society. She knows me, won't it? I would like to say this from this discussion. I first of all thank the organizers for bringing every person to discuss the national budget. I just want to give you the genesis of this discussion. Forward has been at the forefront of advocating for gender budgeting. Nabumba, I don't know the title, she comes from Ministry of Finance. They have really been doing a lot You know, when the budgeting starts, there is what they send out to the local governments called the call circulars, the budget call circulars. By the time I joined Parliament, I was also asking myself, like, you know, the dynamics, you know, my namesake, Nalule Farida, was, you know, I was so vibrant, asking, where is the money? For me, actually, I had read the Constitution of Uganda. I saw the affirmative action provisions for women, for youth, for persons with disabilities. Then when I joined politics, I was asking, where is the money to operationalize the affirmative action provisions? I couldn't see the money. For persons with disabilities, when I was still in city council as a councillor, the only budget they showed me was on rehabilitation. And you know, with rehabilitation, people come to think about my crutches. You know, being able to move, that is very important. But after making me able to move, I want to go to school. I want to go to the antenatal ward. I want to work. So where is the other money for me to go to school? I couldn't see that money. So when I entered Parliament, I found that one of the roles of Parliament was to appropriate money. Then I said, I'm in the right place. My first number one agenda was to bring the discussion of the budget back to the people. And I tell you, I succeeded. When we were making the Public Finance Management Act, some of you have hinted on it. I'm the person who innovated the provision for gender and equity budgeting. You go and read those provisions. Articles 9 there, 7, 8, and so on. They call for a certificate of gender and equity compliance. When the Minister of Finance brings the National Budget Framework Paper to Parliament for approval, we cannot approve that budget framework paper without a certificate of gender and equity compliance. But unfortunately, there are very few Ugandans who know about this provision. And we are very few people now in the circle, you know, trying to see that the budget actually comes out with gender and equity sensitivity. Where equity, for example, represents issues of persons with disabilities, those in hard-to-reach areas, those in difficult circumstances, and so on and so forth. So for me, when I had all those views, some of them, like, you know, people tearing themselves apart, for me, I was happy. We have not been having this kind of discussion in the country. You know, the budget was like a preserve of a few people. But now, so many Ugandans are coming up. And I'm happy that you are coming up. And you should come up more and more people should come on board to demand for accountability. But before you demand for accountability, are you aware about the prevailing laws which provide for budgeting? Do you know that Uganda has been rated as one of the countries in Africa as having the best transparent budgeting process? Do you know that the budgeting process starts from the grassroots? So you shouldn't wait to blame any other person maybe on top. You must look at yourself and see, do I know the laws? Do I participate? Do I demand for the village conferences? Do I demand for the parish conferences? For me, I've been engaged in this thing of the budget. Do you know that is it the sub-county chiefs or whatever? They go during that time, maybe Nabumba would love to listen to this. They go to the parish and look at the parish chiefs. You know, can you tell me, what is the problem here? They never consult the people. You see? You should open up your eyes. What you'll be demanding for is also legally providing for. Nalule was asking, what are the members of parliament doing? Sincerely, Uganda has got the best laws as far as providing for transparent budgeting is concerned. You have to know these laws and you have to use these laws. So, for me, I'm saying, let us, you know, Ugandans, we have a practice. Now we have come to, you know, to analyze the budget. This is post-mortem. But now, having realized these loopholes, what are we doing for the next budget? You see, we cannot get everything at the same time. But, you know, we are going to start now. You know, we are going to start to be more vigilant about the budgeting process. What are you doing now for the budget of 2020, 2021? This is post-mortem. You see? We must keep this kind of debate alive all the time throughout the financial year. If we are now asking for allocations, whatever has been allocated, now we should go out to look for how is this money being utilized. We demand for accountability. We demand for participation in the implementation of the budget. Now, one councillor was talking about, I think the one from Luero, was talking about, the budget not being gender and equity sensitive. And my colleague, the person with disability, was also saying that things are done, but without disability sensitivity. I'm telling you, even at the local government level, you can still use the Public Finance Management Act during the budgeting process. And then you demand that we cannot approve this budget until we see gender and equity provisions in the budget. At national level, with the Ministry of Finance, we have got a national task force which actually scrutinizes the budget together with the Equal Opportunities Commission. Now, even at district level, you can use the Public Finance Management Act. All to enhance this work, the Local Government Act gives you room to legislate an ordinance which can actually support the budget advocacy. Now, somebody was talking about money being brought back. I think we should be very vigilant. This has been a disease for life, Madam Ojambo. And this one time, Honorable, I think we were finding a problem. The causative agent of that was the procurement law. And I don't know whether we have amended the procurement law. But as citizens of Uganda, this is our country. We should push for this. Now, I would like to end with this one. Somebody hinted on it, I think the moderator. The moderator was asking us, now like you are demanding for this money, have you paid your tax? For me, the question I have, wherever we are, whatever we are doing, irrespective of these hurdles we are facing, what are you doing yourself to make sure that the revenue of this country actually increases? There are so many things to do. What are you doing as a citizen of this country to make sure that the revenue is increasing? And lastly, I would like to ask you, kindly, don't wait to do this blame game. Just keep yourself abreast with the current information. Minister of Finance, Nabumba, will tell you, they make even so many publications about know your budget, do this and this. Just know that maybe by next financial year, we would have made an improvement. I thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Honorable Sophia Nalule Juko, for that. She has even answered some of the questions, or at least given us more information to guide our debate. We are on the budget. This one starts in 3 days' time. But remember, the new budget circular code is about to be issued. Are you aware of that? Are you waiting for it? Have you ever seen one? Do you engage it when it comes to the local governments? You don't want to wait to give a post-mortem report. We want to close the mortuary and everybody who enters the wards leaves the other way, not through the back door. But even if anything happens, what are we learning from the current budget? The mistakes that were made, the things that have not been made, how are we planning to engage to make sure the budget is sufficient? But having sat in the Ministry of Finance, there are all those things, that challenges that you face, that the money you have is still not adequate to meet all the things. How do you work between the rock and the hard place? How do you squeeze through that very small gap to go through it? While we were still talking and we hadn't budgeted, Ebola walked into the country. And it wants money like yesterday. Some soils in the eastern are trying to move around. The rains are washing away bridges. Managing a government budget is also not as easy. It's just like you and me managing our own budgets. But I think she has mentioned a very key thing. Vigilance, transparency, information. Can we share information? But how do we deal with these corrupt? I like the way they have caught some of those who are making fraudulent claims. I want to get back to my panel briefly. And we're going to be speaking to the issues you have had, the issues of leaving no one behind, positively, how can we address the issue of leaving no one behind? How do we address the issue of leaving no one behind amidst our tight kind of budgets and situations, especially the farmers? And so I want to begin with one who wants to be a farmer. Rita Achiro, you want to get your hoe. I don't know whether it's a tractor or an ox plow or a stick. We don't know what kind of farming you want to engage in too. Maybe it's Honorable's kind of my dodo is behind my house. How do we make sure the farmers are not left behind? The women are not left behind. The children, the men.
Fortunately for me, I'm a big dreamer, so I'm going to use a combined harvester. Yes. You know, when people are talking, I kept on reflecting and going back, and it's good you've put us into the shoes of my friend Rosette and the ministry and government in general. I just want to say that, Honorable Safia, respectfully so, government cannot run away from its responsibility. So for you to say that we should do whatever we can do to raise the tax base, that is government's responsibility. And that's why we are here talking about human capital development. The issue for us, and I want to also acknowledge the fact that government has endeavored to do what it has done. That's why at times we look at the budget as if whether it is half full or half empty, depending on your vantage point. For a long time, government has prioritized infrastructure development, which is very important. It's a serious catalyst for development. But the issue is, how are we prioritizing? How do we raise that tax base? As an individual private citizen, you cannot task me to say, go and raise the tax base. So if I were, and going back to Dr. Muhumuza's question, or what we should be moving into, if I were to be in that position, and I'll go back to the issues I raised earlier on, what are the reinforcers of this inequality? What are the driving forces behind this inequality? And if I had the power, or whoever has the power, those are the things we need to look at so that we're able to raise the tax base. We all know a budget is an estimated planned expenditure. I can sit here, dream big. I want to own this hotel, right? But where am I going to get the money? We can have the 44 trillion shilling budget or even 60 trillion shilling budget. It's a budget. It's on paper. It doesn't mean the money is there. We are all aware and alive to the fact that over 40% of our budget is going to financing loans. Am I right? So this is a budget. So the point for me, and which should be a concern for all of us, is one, what sources do we have to meet our budget? And that is where the focus should be before we even start talking about the budget. And that goes to my point. If I were to be in the minister's shoes, I would attempt to strike the balance between the financing of infrastructure and aspects of human capital development. We have seen roads, those of you who have driven to the west, very nice roads. We've gone to Karamoja these days, you're almost on tarmac, okay? You're going to South Sudan, you're almost on tarmac. But what's happening on those roads? How many people inside, between the main road, 5-10 kilometers from those main roads actually make use of those roads? My proposition would be, I would strike the balance. I would invest in quality education. Quality education that provides skills for people who can be employed, not underemployed, adequately employed, gainfully earning, from which money we can tax and increase our tax base. I want to agree with Farida Naluli. You cannot continue to tax a few people and you think you're going to finance a budget of 44 trillion shillings. You cannot have a budget of 44 trillion shillings to finance a population that is not contributing, that is totally dependent. I would invest in health. A nation's wealth depends on the health of its people. It increases productivity. I would reduce maternal mortality. I would increase, Dr. Madina talked about the number of years of attainment of school. I would ensure that those who are the majority, and in this case the women, 52%, activities that have economic value. I would industrialize. I am no economist like Dr. Madina, no like Dr. Muhumuza. But the little economics I have gone to in terms of cost units or whatever, we are told of the countries that have turned around. People have made comparisons of Uganda to Malaysia in the 60s. What did they do? They did those three things: education, health, industrialization, population growth, control, in proportion to development. Thank you very much.
Let me ask you to switch off your microphone because you have really spoken a lot of economics. You might think you're not an economist, but that's what exactly economists do.
I am a semi-economist. I can't run away from that fact. But I just wanted to respond to you, Dr. Muhumuza. One thing, sorry. You talked about when you were in Ministry of Finance, you put 60% of the budget into security.
Not in security, to balance out the gender.
To balance out the
Yes.
gender. I think it was the late Nelson Mandela who said, peace is not a state, but it's rather lived. So while you might think these guns have gone silent, people are not at peace.
Sure.
If our women cannot put food on the table, if we are seeing women running with a basket of mangoes, and at times you actually buy these mangoes, for those of you who can afford 20, 50,000, at times I just buy those mangoes for the sake of relieving, or bananas, of relieving that woman to go home. What peace are we talking about? We need to create an environment that promotes peace at a personal level. Peace is not about guns. Peace is my state of mind. Thank you.
That's the gender perspective of things, talking about balancing the boat. We all agree the resources are not sufficient. Where best do you put them? That's number one. I think she spoke to the priorities she would be looking to, but also getting to her last remark, things do evolve differently. 15 years ago, it was about silencing the guns, because the guns were blaring and making noise, especially in northern Uganda. So that time we budgeted to silence the guns. Now, how do we deepen the silence of the guns to make the reality of that peace? It has now changed a new dimension. It's about somebody being safe, being secure, to look after themselves in totality. It's about prioritizing the critical areas. It's about what will make people go to the next level. I must say I dropped out of school myself, but not out of education. And that's why I'm here. I realized I didn't need to be in a school to be educated, because school needed me to have money, which I didn't have. But I could still get education. You want that story? It's another day. But how do we ensure children are being educated? Because now we seem to be paying for them to stay in school, but they are not learning. I don't know how many of you have read Uwezo reports. Are children learning? So we really need to target, I think that's her main message, to address the budget to the specifics that will ensure no one is left behind. Don't talk about the tarmac roads and the kilometers done, like I see reported in the budget. She's speaking to the feeder roads. Majority of these women are sitting a few kilometers or very many kilometers off the tarmac road. Are we investing in the local government roads? Are we investing in maintenance of those roads? I think these are the balancing acts. And remember, I want to end her remarks by summarizing how she wants to be. What farmers do is invest a basket of seed rightfully and then harvest bags of the same seed they invested. So if we really want to tax in future, we need to know how are we investing the smaller budgets today? Would they grow the economy so that future taxation is eased or future revenues? Emmanuel Mutaiziwa, I want to cross right over to your end. What would you say if you had that chair being shared, the Minister of Finance was here? We have left his chair here so that you can speak to it.
One, the first thing that I guess the technocrats or the people at the Ministry of Finance should do is stop projecting these meaningless figures about economic growth that don't speak to specifics. Countries like New Zealand have moved away from that model of measuring the well-being of people in an economy, and they use things like Human Capital Development Index, the quality of life, and things like that. Two is priorities. Let's look, for instance, at the area of energy that this government, the pet project of this government, and you know, it's part of its lofty dream to push Uganda to the middle income status. I've tried to do some bit of research in that area. For instance, as we speak now, we produce an average of about 1,000 megawatts of power, but at peak, we only consume 600 megawatts. What does that mean? The rest is going to waste. And the implication is that we've borrowed to build Isimba, to build Karuma. Immediately the turbines start, getting this electricity out. The guys at Exim Bank or the Chinese or whatever, they immediately want you to pay, to start paying that loan. What's happened? What's the situation on ground? Uganda has, I think, tried to borrow again to put in place infrastructure. And we have also figures from the Oxfam reports that are very clear that more people are becoming poor. So we're getting towards 30%. What does that mean? A poor man is not going to purchase units of electricity when he's going to go hungry. So you can imagine you have this, talk about building dams. You're already going to bring Karuma on board. You don't even have infrastructure to move and sell that power, even across to the neighboring states. You're bringing in more power. And you want to destroy a resource like Machichon Falls, where our women work, which is bringing in the biggest revenues without doing a proper cost-benefit analysis. Researchers showed from Oxford University and elsewhere that dams, heavy investments in dams is no longer bringing in that, return as it's projected. So it's quite flawed and we need to move away from there. But to bring this to very simple terms, and we're talking about manifestly showing that this budget should work for all and be inclusive. I'll give also another example in the health sector. Everyone in this forum is talking about sanitary pads. During my work, I've seen the most extreme cases that I can recollect. For instance, women in the islands who have to move on rickety canoes, you can imagine, and they have to wait for days before this canoe gets to the island to transport a pregnant woman to a health center 3 to deliver. Many of them don't have the monies even to afford the canoe because there's no health center in the island. Look at women who are working in the agricultural sector and are exposed to pesticides that, science has proven that some of these pesticides cause cancer. And this is the extreme. And on the other hand, you have senior government officials who are the best paid being given $120 million to fly out when they have, a tooth decay or, to treat themselves. These are the extremes we must address. It doesn't make sense to have these, things on paper, to have these flowery speeches about inclusiveness, to have policy that rots away in offices without manifestly trying to show that this budget works for the girl who is in a remote area and, cannot, deliver, that this budget addresses issues of reproductive health. So it's meaningless. We must change. We must start allocating sectors that deliberately benefit Ugandans and the women. For instance, even when we have had an increment in the budget, it's still below the Maputo Declaration on Agriculture and Food Safety. So unless we do that, and until we, put these things, do these things practically and show that we care for the other Ugandans, then we can sit here and deliberate until the cows come home, but will not be, working for the ordinary girl and ordinary women in the countryside. Thank you.
Thank you, Emmanuel. I know he enters your homes without invitation through your TV boxes. These days, they are not even boxes, they are flat screens. So he's a human being, for some of you who thought maybe it's an icon or a cartoon. He's a real human being, and he speaks value to issues. I like the way he has related two things. One is generalities and extremes. Do the numbers we use when communicating in the budget, when communicating performance, speak to the people. Quite often, it is very easy to talk about averages. And yet, quite a number of people live in extremes. Are we speaking to those people in the extreme ends of society? When you talk about, on average, every Ugandan woman has 5 or 6 children. Are you addressing the woman whose number of children is 13? That kind of thing. When we talk about we have now improved hospital facilities, are we speaking to the reality of somebody in Kalangala who has to wait for a boat to come every Wednesday to go to hospital? These are people living in the extremes, and we don't want to leave them behind. We have made progress, but it looks like the more things change, the more they stay the same. There was a time when roads were very bad. The bus would come on Monday, come back on Tuesday, go back on Wednesday, come back on Thursday. So you could only travel in intervals of days. Today the taxis are many, the buses are many, the border borders are many. But at the end of the day, when you reach that hospital, do you get the service? And I think these are the messages we are picking from Rita. What does peace mean to you and to me? Is it the silence of the guns, or is it much more than that? I want to get to you, Lydia. Quite a number of your constituency was in the house, and they have expressed realities of what they go through. I want to credit you for mobilizing them to come. I want to somehow suspect your guilt of some of the presence doing your work, to make sure issues of those with disabilities are represented and ably flagged on top. You seem to be succeeding well. If you want to send a word or two to the Minister of Finance or to the people who work on the budget, I know it's always a complex thing. Quite often it's the Minister of Finance, but the budget is Parliament, the budget is caucuses, the budget is the President, the budget is me and you, the budget is the local government. If you were to send a message to those who do the budget, what are the 2-3 things you would want to speak to?
First off, Dr. Muhumuza, as you highlighted, there are still some agencies who say they do not understand what gender and equity inclusive budgeting is all about. So first, it would be about continual training. And now we have local governments being assessed by the Equal Opportunities Commission, looking out for gender and equity responsiveness. So more support is needed. How can that be done? Equal Opportunities Commission needs to be financed even more. Right now it is receiving meager resources, meaning that it is not able to provide the necessary support to these institutions to be able to include issues of gender and equity. After these are trained, the question is, what are the penalties if you do not comply or adhere to these guidelines across the various gender indicators? It is not enough to have hard-to-reach areas and gender performing very well. How are the others doing? And what are the penalties, basically? So Ministry of Finance, as it is the one that issues a certificate of gender and equity, needs to come up with clear penalties for institutions that are failing to comply. 2, we have plans to have more seed primary and secondary schools constructed, health centers being upgraded, health center 2s being upgraded to health center 3s. That is fantastic. So, if they are, what measures are going to be put into place to ensure that these places are accessible to all persons? The youth that are there, youth-friendly corners? Is there information, reproductive information that is being provided to these various persons? Financing to special needs education, still 3.4 billion out of the 3.4 trillion this financial year. That is minuscule, mostly looking at primary and secondary schools. What about tertiary institutions? So as you do know, we expect more of government to be able to ensure that all of these concerns are being implemented. An assessment of these affirmative programs: Uganda Women Entrepreneurship Program, Special Grant for Persons with Disabilities, SAGE 2. I don't think it has had a comprehensive assessment. How many people is this actually reaching out to? The issues of whether they are reaching the same people, or whether people are paying bribes to be able to access these, even when they may not be possibly persons with disabilities or those in the elderly age bracket, among others. For Youth Livelihood Program, there have been assessments by the social development sector and the Auditor General. And it has come up that there is mismanagement, there is failure to recover the funds. What is the sector and Ministry of Finance doing to ensure that there's value for money? If the program is failing and has its weaknesses, what are we doing about it? We cannot keep issuing money with no value. There is duplication, as I highlighted. There is a Youth Capital Venture Fund, YLP, skilling the youth, and various skilling programs across various sectors. Is it possible to merge these skilling programs to be able to reach as many people as possible across the various age groups and women, among others? Discrimination is sad, but very true. Right from whether you're being interviewed to whether you can actually work in given facilities, because they may possibly not be accessible, either physically or through the toilets, among others. And also because these employers may not have provisions for, say, if you need a guide or a sign language interpreter to be able to work with them. So that is something government needs to work on to ensure affirmative action for employment of persons with disabilities. And basically accessibility across all buildings that are accessed by most of the public. How is government ensuring that the Building and Control Act provisions for things like staircases, wide corridors, wide elevators, proper lighting, among others, is being provided for to ensure that no one is left behind?
Thank you. Thank you very much for those additions. I think she's spoken to quite a number of things. We do design, but do we do assess? Do we do evaluate? Do we look for accountability? Do we find value for money? There are quite a number of policies we throw out there. We implement them. Do we take time to see whether they are giving us results? And this quite often falls right in the docket of Rosette Nabumba, who is in the Budget Monitoring and Accountability Act unit, trying to see the value. I've moved out there and I've found a health center called for, health center for, I think, Kitwe, which is close to the border with Rwanda. And the people there is hard to reach, so they are paid better salaries, top up of hard to reach, but then they are not facilitated. So every time they receive a patient, they refer to Itozo Hospital. So at the end of the day, it's not working. You have remunerated them, they are ready to work, but you haven't given them what they are supposed to use. So at the end of the day, they still refer to those who are not well facilitated because Itozo is not characterized as hard to reach. So those are the kinds of things the monitoring information brings out as we continue to refine. The policies may be good, the intention is there, but what is the practice like? And no other person will give us that story better rather than our own, who is from the local government, Busia. Is that a hard to reach? The standard gauge is not coming. The president may come with it from China. But when it comes, it may just pass through you and leave you behind. It may just carry things from Mombasa to Kampala, and Busia is left behind. Please speak to a few messages you would want us to carry home from this discussion. How can we make our budgets better in the theme of leave no one behind?
Actually, you are right. The standard gauge may leave us behind as Busia district. I would like to agree entirely with my colleagues from the local governments who are represented here with the submissions they made. But I'd also like to give hope to persons with disability and appreciate FODE for training us in gender budgeting, whereby when we are doing our budgets, we always look at them with a gender lens. And the 6 5-star surplus latrines I talked about, the ones we are going to construct, we always put there a washroom and a special room for persons with disabilities. So if my colleague happens to come to Busia, at least he will be catered for. And we also have a special grant for persons with disability, which is entirely for them, which is catered for in our budget. In order not to leave anyone behind, what should we do? It's true, we have these programs, that is WEP, YLP, DDEG, but the funds should be managed well, and the right groups should be the one to benefit. That is the only way we shall make sure that no one is left behind. But if it so happens that the same group keeps on benefiting, that one means a lot of people are being left behind. And if I were in the Ministry of Finance, I think the most important thing would be to set our priorities right. Because when we set our priorities right, that one means we are going to address the issues which are pertinent to the people we are serving, and also allocate resources where the actual service delivery is being done. Enough resources. We may allocate resources, but they are not enough. So if I would be in the ministry, I would allocate enough resources to areas I feel that is where service delivery is being done. When Dr. Madina was giving her keynote address, she said, we allocate resources, but where we allocate them, are they enabling us achieve our objective? So we should put that one into consideration. Then timely release of funds to local governments. Ministry of Finance always says that by 10th of the first quarter, they would have released the funds to local government. But when those releases appear in the newspapers, it takes 2 months for the actual money to be realized at the local governments. So I would request that whoever is in charge of the system should try to streamline the system such that things can move faster and then we can offer better services to our people. Then in order to have more inclusive budgeting, all stakeholders should be involved. Honorable has left, but you heard her saying that the villages, the parishes are not consulted. Of course, that one is our work as local governments to make sure that the villages, the parishes are consulted up to the district, then we can forward our priorities to the ministry. So for everyone to be included and no one is left behind, all stakeholders should be involved in budgeting. Also about the procurement process, I think that there needs to be a policy change as far as procurement is concerned, because the time which is taken during the procurement process takes most of the time. By the time the contract is awarded, you are left with around 2 months to the completion of the financial year. So I would still call upon the members of parliament who are here to do something about it. We have always been talking about the middle income status. By, is it 2020? And this is 2019. I don't think we shall be there by then. So my appeal would be that we should lay strategies on how to improve household incomes. Even if we bring electricity, we bring roads, the way Rita has said, but the household incomes are low, we shall not reach the middle income status. So we should lay strategies on how best to assist the communities to improve their income, their household income status. And then finally, I would appeal to the ministry that let us reduce on the public debt. The Honorable Member of Parliament said the money which is collected by URA, all of it is going to pay the interest on the debt. And for us, what we are going to use, I think, is donations from donors. So we should try our level best to reduce on the public debt, such that we can have enough money to cater for the needs of our people. Thank you so much.
Thank you very, very much for passionately speaking to the realities right from the local governments. Timely releases is important for them. And then participation and engagement so that we are able to address the real issues that are affecting the people. I'm glad to hear your toilet stances do make provision for those in the extremes so that they can also gainfully and rightfully access them. There are quite a number of intentions she's talked about that are within the budget, but somehow the implementation gets distorted. The money is intended for the women, knowing that they have extreme conditions that may not allow them to access resources, but then the implementation, somebody said the same groups keep coming back, but even those same groups, sometimes the allocations are not adequate. The debt will eat 20%, according to IMF findings of our revenues, servicing interest, and if we keep gathering the debt, then we might eat into our future. We are soon drawing to the close of our conversation. We still have a few more things to do. But if you feel you really want to take a break, please stand up, walk around so that you don't walk in front of my cameras, as we agreed before. I want to listen in. There is somebody from Equal Opportunities Commission, so they are watching and taking some notes. I want to give Honorable the last slot for now to briefly say what is it. You're already in government. As far as we are concerned, the parliament is government. But what would you say that you would want to the public to go away with? And then I will give an opportunity to, just in case the Minister of Finance wants to say something. I've seen they've taken a lot of notes, so but they will have a slot there to say something as well. Honorable, some 3-4 minutes for you.
Yeah, thank you. Let me respond to, I didn't pick her name. She was asking a question whether I'm the only one who has expert knowledge on this budget. No, I'm not even an expert, but I was in the process. I participated in the process of making the budget, and we took note. We came up with a minority report, and this report, the main report of the budget and the minority report, you can find it on the parliamentary website, so that you compare what I'm speaking about with what is surprising you. And then the other thing is politics is a game of numbers. So sometimes you say these things, they come out, they're on the record and answer to Parliament, but because you have the numbers, with those in favor say aye, to the contrary, no. So when the aye sounds more than you, then the ayes will have it. But this will not mean that you must lose track of the information. Now, before I say what I would have done, well, sometimes when we talk about government, we're talking about the executive. But I mean government, right, because it has 3 arms. But I think I'm in the legislature. Now we have the challenges that all governments have been facing is trying to plan economic development based on physical capital, roads, bridges, huge infrastructures, and that the effect is that economic development will be spurred automatically. That someone has good road can go to the market and sell her things, can sell his commodity. But does the person have the capacity to generate that commodity at production level? Has the person been helped enough? Is the person using the road, the bridges, and so on we're talking about? How many of our people are using the Entebbe-Kampala Express Highway? But we are going to pay, including my mother, who is in the village, is going to pay for not even seeing the highway. Now, therefore, that's why the world is now moving from doing physical capital planning to human capital development, which is in a good spirit. As a mother at home, you know that you'll be happy when your children have where to sleep decently, if they've eaten something. None of them is complaining the whole night. My stomach is paining, my head is aching, you know. And they go to school, it makes you happy. Now, the world is saying that's what government should do. Invest in the health of the children, the youth, and the adults of your nation. Invest in the education, give them skills and knowledge that can make them face the challenges ahead. So I think we need to move away from the physical capital planning approach of economic development to human capital. And I want to thank for bringing out this very, very clearly. Now, the other thing is, if we don't concentrate on agriculture so that we have the food in excess and what we can sell, by the way, agriculture must be end in end in the chain, value chain. In other words, in the production we must concentrate. But once you produce, once you are farmed, you have, in Uganda they say there's okukungola and there's what? Now, when you have planted and you have harvested, you need now to find the market. In other words, in the agricultural chain, we must also invest in access to market and looking for the market. Now, there's the other thing that I need to add on what my colleague Achiro has said, Madam Achiro. We lose a lot in the post-harvest handling. We went to Germany and came back and proposed to government and said, even for our health, post-harvest handling is very essential. Because when moisture is in these grains and so on, somebody will eat this moisture with the already bacteria, with the germs and so on, because the moisture is providing opportunity or a breeding ground in the grains and the nuts and so on. So post-harvest handling, the world is concentrating on it and investing seriously by providing silos, by providing huge coolers in markets, so that when a mother has sold her cassava or her perishable vegetables and has no opportunity of selling it again tomorrow, can store it in a public storage facility. Now, in that alone, we are losing a lot. That's why when you go to Nebi during the mango season, just go in the evening around 8 p.m. in the market. Be ready to fetch as much basins of mangoes as possible, because women will just abandon the mangoes and go back home. So you just carry all these things away. So now, in other words, in agriculture, we should concentrate. Look at the budget of this year. 91% of the budget is concentrating on production. Only 7% is concentrating on investing in marketing, market access, and post-harvest handling. When we were in Dubai, they told us they needed 20 containers every month from Uganda of tomatoes. My brothers and sisters, we ask ourselves, all we needed is a cargo plane, because if we use Emirates, they will be charging us about $1.6 per ton. That's a lot of money. So if we had a cargo plane just shifting these things, and we have an organized farming system like in Germany, you never farm anything until government comes and tells you, we have got for you a market. If people want to farm there, you come, you sign a contract, you have a clear market, and you start farming, then government makes sure that whatever you produce is sold. So when we're talking of agriculture, we should also look at the policy that encourages people to farm, and also looking for the market, adding along the value chain. The other thing is education. I want to add on what my sister said. With education, I think it must be both quantitative and qualitative. Quantitative in the context of the infrastructure. Look at how children are studying under mango trees. Now, those mango trees are called classrooms of government school. That is an irony. Now, when you look at the teacher to pupil ratio, in my place is 108. A teacher is teaching 108 children. It's supposed to be 1:56. Latrine stands to pupils ratio is supposed to be 1:52. In other words, one hall of a pit latrine must be used by 52 children. Ask yourself in your district, what is it? Mine is 78. Now, when it comes to inspection, sometimes we fail because inspectors are not going to do a good job. Why? Because they're not being supported. One inspector is supposed to inspect 40 schools. Just in Wakiso here, in this budget report that we have at Parliament, one inspector is inspecting 450 schools. And we're saying we are actually investing in human capital development, which starts with education, learning, and developing your skills and knowledge. In Nebi, one inspector inspects 150 schools. So I think we need to concentrate on this micro component of our economy that will make us lose sight even on the bigger macro picture. And then you have the question of household income. What do we do to increase household income? Apart from telling people, this is what the kind of crops you need to farm, but we're not looking for the market. What we've been doing at these projects, Youth Livelihood Program, and then we have the SAGE. Now with the SAGE, Ministry of Finance, please restore the component. There were two components. One, the elderly, those who are 75 years and above. And by the way, they're not even there. They die at 60-something because my dad started enjoying it after 2 years, he passed on. Now, so many people die before enjoying it. And now they've limited only 100 elderly people per sub-county must benefit. So now, whom will you consider? The one who is 78, the one who is 75, and then the other component was for the vulnerable. Vulnerable, we had planned and looked at 1, child mothers, 2, widows, 3, women whose husbands have abandoned them. Those were the vulnerable groups that were funding under SAGE. That component was removed 3 years ago, and we complained. So we are talking about gender-sensitive budgeting, but this is where we are. Even when you look at the score on the gender equity, the compliance, if we were to go strictly by what she has said, I am telling you, the sector on education would not receive its budget. Even on health, they brought their ministerial policy statements actually later than the 15th of March, which is the deadline. In other words, 33 votes were not assessed. Out of the 147 votes, only 114 were assessed, and they performed below level. So when we were introducing these gender equity standards, actually it was meant to even punish those sectors that would not comply with the gender equity, will not give you the budget. But again, you begin asking yourself, who is going to suffer most? It's the Ugandans. Now, that said and done, who are the supervisors of where the service delivery is done most? It's the local government. Here we are punishing them. Actually, we have talked of unspent balances being sent back, limited amount being sent to them, but also you have the other issue that you don't need to run away from. When they have a project under counterpart funding, Government fails on counterpart funding. For example, for SAGE now to run very well, we need 29 billion. The donors are almost withdrawing. Kawolo Hospital, to be fully constructed, counterpart funding of 6 billion, government is not giving. REA, Rural Electrification Agency, where actually the rural poor can benefit and receive power, they need 12 billion counterpart funding. Government is not cooperating, and all these grants are going to collapse. And the annoying thing, sometimes we end up signing, we'll pass a budget with the counterpart funding for projects which fail to take off, and those monies find themselves under illegal environments. They are reallocated somewhere in a way that you cannot tell. So I think that is where local government is also affected. Another one is we introduce environmental levy and said for every car you are buying, if it's older than 8 years, you are going to pay environmental levy. The intention was to have this money go to local governments to help in maintenance of the roads and also as conditional grant. We also said, fine, we're also introducing a levy on petrol and diesel. That money is supposed to go to Uganda Road Fund. Minister of Finance, why are you holding on that money? It's supposed to be for road maintenance. Because actually to replace a bad road is more expensive than just keeping on maintaining it.
Honorable, the last one.
So anyway, as we summarize, and I think what is very important for us, we need to stop borrowing so that we can plan within our budget. Do you know that we have 43.3 trillion debt that we're going to pay for 94 years? That is if government stopped today borrowing. But believe me, even today at Parliament, they will bring another proposal to borrow. So 94 years that we're going to pay back. So this robust physical capital approach of economic development, I think we need to rethink it. And also, our Minister of Finance, we have projects of human capital development in different sectors, education, health, and so on. There are 12, but they're stagnating. Then if you look at the Uganda National Development Plan 2, we have core areas. There are about 19. Constructing Albertine Airport, which line to where. All these things have not taken off. And we're coming to 2021-22, a year of the end of the Uganda National Development Plan. So the other last one, I think, Mr. Moderator,
yes,
as Ugandans, we need to, when we're doing national projects, there's the tendency of inflating cost of national projects.
Sure.
It takes 1.1 to 1.2 million US dollars to construct 1 megawatt of power. But Bujagali was constructed at 3.6 million US dollars for 1 megawatt of power. This is the very reason why SGR cannot take off. When we went to Ethiopia, the cost was 8 times less than what they were going to construct our SGR on. Then we said, no, this is unacceptable. For Kenya, it was 5 times more than if we had started ours. So we said, no, I think this is untenable. So that tendency also, actually, they are robbing from us. People are eating layers of roads, eating the width of roads, eating electricity projects, and I think it has to stop.
Thank you. A round of applause for the Honorable and for my panel. I hope we have had an engaging discussion this far. This conversation is going to continue. Online, offline, on the streets, off the streets, where the extreme people live, where we live. It's going to be a continuous conversation. The Forum for Women in Democracy, we want to appreciate for the interventions, not just what is happening here. I think Busia Jambo has told us, you've even trained them there. So they are not just talking about things, they are actually working on things. I want to give some few minutes to the Ministry of Finance to make some responses, and then we'll see how we proceed from there. Madame Rosette Nabumba. Did I say Madame Mr. Minister? It's Minister of Finance this time.
Moderator, our speakers for today and the participants as well as viewers, thank you so much for such a stimulating discussion, because I believe we will all go our way having new ideas of how things should be. Thank you so much. And on behalf of the Ministry of Finance, I would like to acknowledge that we have many members here. We have taken note of the recommendations, the suggestions, the pitfalls in the budget, and should be able to find ways of addressing them. But let me just make a few remarks. One, it's not acceptable to have anyone left behind. That one we all agree that we must work very hard. It's our duty to ensure that the budget, as a policy instrument for realizing impact, should be useful to everybody. Nobody should be left behind. But the question is, how do we do this? And this is what we have been deliberating since morning. When Ministry of Finance is budgeting and allocating resources, the whole idea is to align the budget to the needs of the population. And now the critical question which comes out from this debate is, do we really know who is left behind? We might know who has benefited. The statistics speak. They tell us where, how, who has benefited, but they don't speak enough on who is left behind. And therefore, this is a big job for the researchers and academia to actually point out and say, is it the people with disabilities? Where are they located? Is it the youth? Is it the girl child, as you have mentioned? And for instance, we have talked about a problem which is very, very, very pertinent, which is the drivers of inequality. We all observe, and this issue was mentioned as far back as 2010, when the Poverty Eradication Action Plan was evaluated. And it was clear that if inequality is going to increase, and it will continue increasing. But still we are saying the same things. And many of us who are sitting here are development practitioners. So the question is, what have we been doing? What are we supposed to do to make sure that we address these issues? Many questions revolved around the issue of recurrent expenditure, balancing the budget. How much goes into development? How much goes into recurrent? This is an everyday discussion in Ministry of Finance. We all have to think clearly, what does it take to deliver service in this country? At one point, the budget was almost 60-70% recurrent, and a lot of work went on to eliminate workshops, seminars, travel abroad, and things like that. And that has continued until we have a much larger budget in development expenditure. But today, the same implementers are saying, but this is too tight. You have given me so much money for development expenditure, but it's not matched with recurrent expenses to supervise. So this is our joint role to find possible solutions of that balance which we are looking for. For instance, the question is, if like Busia indicated and Gulu, that I think Gulu said 30 billion out of 31 is recurrent and goes to wage, and what does that mean? Are we saying that teachers and nurses are not part of service delivery? What is service delivery? We might want to ask ourselves, when we are discussing and saying a large proportion of the budget is recurrent and goes to our teachers, they are always on the street also asking for much more. And that's a dilemma, because everybody wants much more actually than what we are giving. And so when you say reduce on the recurrent, then more strikes, so what do we do? So these are the questions that we all battle with on a day-to-day basis. Questions were asked about release of funds on time. We really want to keep a standard where releases are made on time. But unfortunately, in the system, there is always some blockages which lead to people accessing this money a little bit later. And the public financial management reforms have aimed at ensuring that we move from that position where money, as soon as it is released, it reaches the intended beneficiaries. And therefore, that will continue to be the stance that we would like to see, that the money, when appropriated, it's released as appropriated and reaches the intended beneficiaries in time. We have talked a lot about issues of household income, and I think from the academia side, we need to do a lot to see, when we talk about GDP growth, we talk about development, we talk about gender responsiveness. How does this all tie into household incomes? We have always been talking about increasing household incomes. I saw a pillar of that in the 2000 Poverty Eradication Action Plan. 20 years later, we are asking the same question, household incomes. I think it's our joint work to find how do we translate the GDP into something which someone takes to the market and they buy their food, their drinks, their medicine and everything. It's still a challenge. So the MP said stop borrowing. I think this is our joint job, because how does a loan come to be operational? At some point it passes through Parliament and it is passed and appropriated. So I think we all have a role to play. Who stops the loan from coming? I will leave that at that point in terms of discussion. Dr. Medina, you brought out very salient issues of ensuring technical and allocative efficiency and value for money in spending. That's very, very important. And that will always continue to make sure that we also are sensitive to the demographic changes. And this is why we are here anyway, because gender and equity responsiveness addresses the issues pertaining to demographic dividend. So as I wind down, there were very many questions. All we can say is that we shall make sure that the budget which we put out starting from July, first of all, I want to confirm that it's alive. It wasn't born, stillbirth. It's very alive, and this is why we're discussing it. Otherwise, we would all have gone home and not come here if it was stillbirth. We want to assure all Ugandans that the budget will reach out as far as possible to even the smallest corner in terms of service delivery. Always the problem we have is that money is never enough. What is enough? When we say allocate enough money, what is enough? We know the budget we have. We all have to struggle to make sure that the little that we have reaches as many as possible. Of course, some people have also complained about the IPFs that are given to implement programs. Yes, somebody must put order into the budget. Somebody, if all of us were the cook, then who would be able to say this is my part and that is my part? What we have to do is to continue this sort of dialogue and see how do we make these IPFs responsive to the needs of the population. I thank you so much for having invited us, and all the issues you have mentioned are very pertinent and will be taken on board, and I will convey them to the minister whom I came to represent. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Madam Rosette Nabumba Nayenga, and on behalf of the Ministry of Finance for giving the communication. I've seen part of your team here includes people I taught, and I want to believe since I taught them and they passed, they know how to make good notes and give appropriate reports to where they should go. So whatever we've been discussing here has ably been taken note of. The conversation continues. The budget is alive. The budget process does not close. That's why quite often we go back to members of parliament with supplementary requests. It's an active engagement. So don't think that the budget was read and passed and when it starts, our spaces are not in. Continue to engage, continue to talk, but also remember it's a tight budget. Budgets are really, like I said, between what me and you go through on a day-to-day basis. Should you have that dinner? Should you suspend it? Nobody chooses to have 1 meal a day or even no meal at all, but because while you are planning to buy posho and beans, somebody falls sick, and that becomes an emergency. But that's why we want to continuously engage, continuously talk. But while we were discussing here, district utilization of funds, the worst performing 10 districts. Remember, there were very many entities. Ntungamo, Buko, Abim, quite a number of districts are here. Kotido Municipal Council, Rwanda District. These are worst performing in terms of utilization of funds. They have not been able to utilize the funds. The reason may be many. Either the money came late or possibly even they don't even have somebody to help them utilize the funds. It could be the procurement process continuously dragged on. It could be counterpart funding did not come. There are quite a number of issues that we've been discussing here. So when you're reading that report, hesitate to blame a district for failing to utilize the funds until you have heard the story, and bring back that story into the conversation for us to engage it so that our budgets can refine and get better. Where do we put our resources? How do we invest? I want to continue with the message of the farmers. They get one basket, plant it wisely, and then harvest the sacks. Today's budget should speak to future budgets. If we use the resources strategically, the future budgets would be better. I want at this point to invite the one who gave us opening remarks to come and give us the closing remarks. The chairperson for WODI. I don't know who is delegated to come and close. You possibly have somebody under your sleeve. There was somebody supposed to come and do the closing, whom I was told was not able to come, but gainfully we seem to have very good representation. Forum for Women in Democracy, please give them a round of applause. My panelists, please, thank you very much. Please appreciate the panel as well. And I want to ask them to feel free to find a chair where they want to sit, including the one where they are. You have the floor.
Thank you very much. A round of applause for our wonderful moderator, Dr. Muhumuza. Honorable Minister, Representative Rosette Nabumba, Honorable Members of Parliament, members of local government, the chairperson, the Board of Directors, Forum for Women in Democracy, members of Forward here present, members of the civil society fraternity, members of the academia, members of the media, ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to thank you very much on behalf of the Forum for Women in Democracy for this very active participation in an area that is really very important to all of us. My job today is quite simple. That is to thank you for coming to this meeting, to this dialogue. This has been really, this discussion is very critical to the lives of women and men, boys and girls in Uganda. And for us at Forward, this is just the beginning. It's not just the beginning, it's just the beginning of a continuous journey, because these are discussions that we have to keep on having. Once again, I'd like to say thank you to the panelists. You were wonderful, and I'd like us to give them another round of applause. Thank you very much. I'd like to thank NTV for this wonderful partnership. Thank you. And I'd like us to clap for NTV. I'd also like to say thank you to the members of the Uganda Gender Consortium on SDGs who helped us organize this wonderful dialogue. Thank you, Uganda Gender Consortium on SDGs. And since I get the opportunity to close, I'll just quickly summarize some of the things that I picked today. Planning and budgeting are really what I'd call occupational hazards for most women, including women at the village. think. They don't have to have gone to school, but normally planning for the family, planning for the children, planning for everybody is an occupational hazard for many women. So what I'm saying here is women, even those who haven't gone to school generally, tend to be experts at planning and budgeting. And so when we think about it, they should ideally be really engaged in these discussions at all levels. I think, Doctor, you agree with me on this one, about the expertise of women in planning and budgeting. And if this is the case, they need to be engaged in these discussions. I liked the caution from the honorable member from Busia, who said we have to set our priorities right. And the question I'd have, whose priorities? Whose priorities are we talking about? And one of the things that come to mind is the kind of language, and I think Emmanuel referred to this, about using very big jargon. You see, you could impress the World Bank and the IMF and then leave your citizens confused. So who do you want to understand what you're saying? I think that was Emmanuel's point, and I hope that if nothing moves forward, at least that point is taken. Who should we be communicating to? Who do we want to impress? Who are we serving? And I liked the aspect about stopping borrowing. I don't know how feasible it is, because I hear another view from the Ministry of Finance. But I think one of the things that come out clearly is that there are concerns, and we have to moderate ourselves. And taking decisions, and the other aspect is, how do we get money for the budgets? We stressed the importance of taxation, but as one of the panelists says, taxing the living daylights out of a few people is not going to get us there. So we need to be thinking again. And once again, when we talk about priorities and whose priorities, I like to draw us again to the fact that women make up more than 50% of our population. And if you asked women here, if you had to choose between your bodily integrity and having beautiful roads, what would you choose? I know that most women here would choose bodily integrity, security of person, being protected from violence and rape, and yet these are areas that we don't really budget for. Are we budgeting for peace? Finally, I'd like to just reiterate again the need for the ministry to go back to some of the steps you had started with. We started with bottom-up planning, but the reality, and I think many at the local government will be my witnesses, this is not really happening. It's not really happening. I know it's not being budgeted for, and we need to go back to the basics so that we can actually benefit people. With those few remarks, I'd like once again to say thank you so much and call upon you to continue the discussion. Let it not stop now, let it not stop today, because it is too important a discussion to be left only to the experts or to be left only to politicians. I'd like to thank you once again. God bless you. Thank you.
After closing remarks, we have closed, but we have opened the other side of the discussion. Feel free to interact with our keynote speaker. Thank you very much, Dr. Globa Madina. Interact with her and pick more values from her. Interact with your neighbor, ask them what they have learned. Now, if they are better at gender budgeting, interact with the panelists. You have those things you may possibly have wanted to ask them one-on-one. Meet your parliament. Honorable is here for you to talk to. Please, thank you very much, Forum for Women in Democracy, for bringing us together. Thank you very much, NTV, for bringing this live and making it reach out to the people. I hope you have been sending those tweets on our hashtag gender budgeting. Everybody, let's meet in the coming year when the budget will be operationalized, running effective, midnight Monday. Thank you, everybody. Thank you very much.